Delivery drivers reveal their most unhinged encounters. Weirdest drop-offs ever. I was delivering a pizza, and after I knocked on the door, I heard a faraway voice yell, "Coming!" So I waited. After about a minute, I heard the same voice a little closer yell, "Almost there, just wait." This continued for several minutes, with the voice coming closer and closer until the person finally reaches the door and opens it. I'm expecting to see someone at eye level. However, instead I'm greeted by a smiling person on the floor who had no legs and dragged themselves across the house to answer the door. I offered to put the pizza inside for them in the kitchen, and they were pretty appreciative. The guy who answered the door looked like he'd just seen a ghost and was a bit jittery, so I'm pretty sure he was on some kind of substances. Anyways, he hands me $10 for a $15 bill and tries to go back inside real quick. I realize that he didn't hand me enough money, so I knock on the door and tell the guy he still owed me like $5. So he starts patting his pockets and finally pulls his hand out as if to give me more money, but he's got nothing in his hand. He extended his hand to give me this imaginary coinage and was visually surprised when I wasn't fooled by his trickery. The guy does this 2 or 3 more times before having me call my manager to attempt to use his card to pay, even though I'm sure he knew it wouldn't work. At this point, he goes back inside because he just heard his roommate come in and he's going to borrow money from him. So I wait and I wait until I knock again. The guy cracks the door, sees it's me, and closes the door again really quick, like he was surprised I didn't go away. Eventually, after about 10 minutes of irritation and feeling like I might get shanked, I told the guy I either needed the money or the food, which he reluctantly gave back. All in all, a very strange experience. In short, delivered to a smacked-out dude who tried to nick me into accepting imaginary money. So I delivered like 5 pizzas to this guy once. I had to ring the doorbell several times before he came to the door. When he got there, he didn't really say anything except to come in real quick. Now, you're not supposed to go into people's houses, but I decided, who cares, I can defend myself. I get inside this guy's huge house, and it is full of weird crap. There was a full suit of armor right by the door, and somewhere he had his Halloween CD playing creepy, deep-voiced laughs. While he's searching for his wallet, the biggest dog I've ever seen walks up to me and just falls at my feet, pushing me over. So I'm sitting next to a suit of armor petting this massive dog, waiting for a middle-aged man to pay me. He gave me a $40 tip. I love crazy rich people. I know that I would have been worried about getting chloroformed and waking up in the basement, so I admire your gumption. I'd have assumed the dog was in on it too and run screaming out of the house, followed by that happy bear dog boy as well. A man answered the door in a robe. The robe was closed, but I guess he wasn't wearing undies, because as we're exchanging money, a stream of pee starts to just drop between his legs and right onto his own carpet. He doesn't seem to notice, or just doesn't care. I take a big step back out of the splash zone, and he just keeps making small talk while it's happening. Was he old? He may legitimately not have noticed. He wasn't too old, early 50s. I'm not sure how he didn't notice. The sound of a heavy stream of that hitting the carpet is honestly pretty loud. I should have mentioned this was delivery for a pharmacy. I believe he had a mental disability, as I recall he was getting psych meds. Pulled up to this easily $1 or $2 million house, a lady opens the door, and as she's signing the receipt I hear, "Bethany, Willis is in the dog food again." This is deep in Louisiana, so this is all in a typical southern drawl. I look behind her and see a man chasing a full-grown, pot-belly pig wearing a Louisiana State University jersey away from what I assume is the dog food area. Willis then returned to the area shortly after. Wait, was the man or the pig in the LSU jersey? The pig. It was actually pretty cute. In 2005, I delivered 30 pizzas to an Amish family. About a 35-minute drive. The entire family met me outside to grab a pizza. I took the rest in and followed them inside to their dining table. The elder of the family gestured for me to sit down with them, and he pointed to the one open seat. I realized that they'd saved me a seat to eat with them. I didn't know too much about the Amish back then, and I wasn't sure how rude it would be to have to say that I'm working and couldn't or shouldn't. I was also thinking, on the other hand, they could have killed me. Remember, I wasn't an educated 16-year-old. So I just sat down and ate 2 slices of pepperoni pizza with them. I found the girl across the table to be very attractive. They said a prayer of some sort and didn't talk much after that. Just asked my name and how thankful they were for me to drive all that way. I finally had to get back to work. They didn't tip, which was fine. I enjoyed the time with them. To answer the questions I'm getting about how they ordered, I don't know about all families, but I saw a lot of Amish heads of household, fathers typically, carrying big blocky cell phones for business purposes. Besides farming, a lot of the families made furniture for the clothes displays in stores and at malls and such. They had huge barns to make furniture. They'd have huge generators behind the buildings to run the equipment. They couldn't be connected to city power, and the generators couldn't run electricity for the house or lights, but the rules for the barn were different somehow. They aren't as disconnected as one may think. However, their house was completely standard by Amish terms. Still had to heat up the bath the old-fashioned way, and there were flies all over the place and no fans. I didn't see how they kept their food cold, if that was at all possible during the summer. No washer or dryer, but the generators sure did help with their business practices like running power tools and such. They also don't drive, but they have vans and they would hire a non-Amish driver to take them to the city sometimes. Was delivering to a neighborhood that typically was kinda sketchy, so I always expected no tip or a very small one. I rolled up to one lady's house and she said something along the lines of, "I don't have the money and my husband will be here in 20 minutes with some cash." It was the last delivery of the night, so I wasn't worried about taking too long, and then she opened up her garage door. There was a pool table and fridge and TV in there, and she gave me a beer and we played pool until her husband came and gave me the money along with a $20 tip. One of the better nights working that job. Strangest I had was a girl who put on her special instructions, "Please tell me I'm pretty." I did. She smiled and said thanks, closed the door, and I never saw her again. Maybe one day I'll get lucky. This was my first month of delivering pizzas. I pulled up to a fourplex, 2 floors, 2 apartments per floor, and I knocked on the correct door. After a minute, an old scruffy Russian-sounding guy answers the door and says, "How much?" I told him the total and he walks off to get the money. I look over to my right and I can see the top of his wife's head poking over the back of a recliner. She's gabbing away with a friend on the phone, just going on and on. After a minute or two of listening to her wondering what's taking this guy so long, I hear a change jar being emptied on the counter. Oh, this guy's gonna pay me with all change and doesn't even have it counted. Crap. I sighed hard, but was thankful he was slow at the time, so I wouldn't really miss out on any money waiting for this guy. So here I am, listening to this old lady blabbing on, not understanding pretty much anything she's saying, while I can hear the old man scooting change around as he counts it. Finally, after a solid 5+ minutes of standing there, the old man walks out and says something to his wife in a foreign language. She rotates the chair around so I can clearly see her, and there is no phone. I immediately stuck my head inside looking for a phone. I can see the table by the chair is empty and there's nothing on her hands, on her lap, or on the floor. I looked everywhere for this phone and there wasn't one. She was literally talking to herself, or I guess the wall. I started going crazy in my head, wondering what was going on. She starts talking to the air again and turns her chair back towards the wall. The guy goes and grabs the money and hands me a bag. It was filled with nickels and dimes. There wasn't a quarter or silver dollar or anything. I just looked at him, bewildered, and then to her, mouth slightly agape, wondering what was happening. "Is 20 cents for you?" I said nothing. I turned around with my bag of change and walked back to my car. The whole thing took about 15 minutes, most of which was spent with me standing in a wide-open door in the middle of summer, listening to a crazy old lady talk to the wall. When I got back to the store, I plopped the bag of money down and explained what happened. My manager says, "You never know what to expect. Heck, a few months ago someone delivered to an adult movie shoot and saw all of the women walking around buck wild. Never found out if that one was true or not, but I like to think it was." I'm pretty sure I saw that movie. Well, it had a pizza delivery guy in it at least. Come to think of it, it could have been any number of those movies. Must happen a lot. I know of a kid who was a substance addict that had pizza delivered to his house. Once he heard his doorbell, he walked out his back door with a ski mask on and robbed the delivery driver in front of his own home. After that, he walked back around the home and opened the front door from inside, pretending to be surprised that the guy was robbed. The idiot ended up getting arrested, but it was the worst plan ever hatched by somebody that I knew. I had a delivery that needed to be signed for, and nobody answered the door when I knocked. I went to my car to write a notice slip when this woman starts waving me up and pointing to the back of the house. So I walk back there, and she isn't there. In fact, nobody's there, so I go to knock on the back siding door. A guy in his 60s, weighing at least 300 pounds, answers and is wearing nothing but a small as frick shirt. He's kind of pulling down the front to cover his hanging berries, but his dogs were barking and he spun around and bent down in their little faces, yelling at them. butthole right in my face. Then he turns back and I ask him to sign for his package. He lets go of his shirt, which of course bounces up to his belly button, and lets all of the components of his manhood fly and bounce free. I got the signature and race walked back to the car to get the heck out of there. It was so uncomfortable. They had a plan, they made a timeline and factored in all of the variables, set up cameras and got their game on. You messed it all up by not ringing the doorbell and saying, "Did someone order a pizza?" You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? This is probably not answering correctly, but it was still weird. Delivered to this house and I noticed that they were in the garage, so I went over to the garage door. They actually had a whole glass blowing operation in their garage and showed me the whole in and out of the operation. They gave me a brand new bowl they'd just blown and a good amount of green herb for a tip. Not weird like uncomfortable, just different than usual. I once delivered pizza to what seemed like a gang house. I pulled up and there were all these intimidating dudes with tattoos and bandanas all wearing the same colored clothes. I puckered up and felt my manhood shrivel as I awkwardly shuffled past them with a bunch of pizzas to ring the doorbell. They were all staring me down and it felt like the longest walk ever. The person who ordered the pizza must have been the head honcho because he looked like the baddest of the bunch. The total was like $70 and he gave me a $100 bill and told me to keep the change. I bolted out of there and returned back to the pizza place on autopilot because I was so scared. "You got a $30 tip though, what a cool dude." Yeah, it was, actually one of the most generous I've gotten, but generosity was not the first thing on my mind during this transaction. I was a delivery boy for an Asian restaurant for quite a while. Had a delivery down a sketchy, very bumpy road in the back of my small town near all these retailers. When they answered the door, there was a 50 to 60-year-old lady standing completely undressed in front of me, as well as two men of the same age sitting on the couch with their ding-dongs out, again, completely undressed. I obviously got out of there as fast as possible, took her signature and nearly ran away. She yelled at me through the window, "Come inside with us," and I said, "Frick no," as I was walking away, and she proceeded to curse at me as I jogged back towards my car. It's interesting what kind of people you meet. I mean, mine is tame compared to some of these, but literally my first day doing deliveries, I punch the address into my phone and arrive as quickly as possible. Neighborhood is a bit shady, but no judgment. Note on the door is really bad handwriting, but it says to knock because the doorbell is broken. Nothing unusual so far. Guy opens the door, old scruffy skinny white guy. Says to come to the kitchen, that's where his cash is. At that moment I realize I shouldn't enter a stranger's house, but I didn't really have an excuse ready, like company policy says no or something. So the next thing I know I'm in his living room? That's what it should be anyways, but it's full of retail clothing racks full of clothes and a couple of mannequins. Needless to say, I thought I was going to be murdered, but we get to the kitchen where the money and a cat are on the counter. He shuffles through the cash, pays me an exact change and just takes the pizza to another room. So I walk back through the store to the front left and leave. Now I always have an excuse ready. I work for a company called Waiter. Basically, we were partnered with certain restaurants and we'd deliver for them. It was my last drop of the night and when we got to the door, something smelled rather musky. I knocked and waited a few moments until the door opened. There stood a man with a massive glass pipe looking medicated beyond belief. It took me a couple of minutes to explain who I was and why I was giving him food. He was as friendly as could be. He even offered to share his food and green herb with me because I was such a sweet guy for coming all the way out here. I was a Chinese food delivery girl back in high school. Mid to late 50-year-old man comes to the door in an opened towel robe wearing Spider-Man undies. This gentleman opened the door very casually and honestly. I didn't think much of his undies. What was really funny was from the other room I heard what I assumed to be his wife call out, "Is that Chinese or pizza? Did I win?" The man saw the white plastic bag and sighed, "You won." As he was closing the door, after giving a generous tip, all I could hear was a celebratory woo from the woman. I delivered pizza for a few years in college. One of my deliveries to a hotel had a guy answer the door in nothing but boxers and a beanie. We traded money for the pizza, as I give him his change, and I hear another guy yell, unseen from behind the corner, "If he's cute, we'll let him keep the rest." The guy at the door hands me back the change and smiles. I wasn't sure how to react, so I just turned and left. This happened just yesterday. I was having a lady sign her CC slip when an undressed toddler comes running from the backyard. Okay, cool, sometimes kids go crazy like that, so what? The thing is, she had no idea whose kid it was. Just a random buck-wild baby running through like they owned the place. What do you do when that happens? What's the appropriate response to finding an unknown, stark-as infant in your place of dwelling? Is there a solution that doesn't open one up to some sort of legal trouble if it's perceived in the wrong way? How do you manage this situation? This was a few years back, but it's still crazy to me. Pulling up, the house was already a bit strange since there were a lot of cars in the yard and the neighboring yards too, and I was only delivering one pizza. I assumed there was a party and I was delivering to the chaperone or something. I was invited into the foyer by a lady, and I obliged. Normally we don't go into houses, but I remembered overhearing something about special instructions. The lady asked me if I'd take the pizza into the basement. Alarms immediately went off in my head. I politely tried to get out of that request, stating we were busy and making excuses. She persisted politely and said she'd tip me better, which just reinforced the alarms. Again, I politely refuse. She gets a sad look and says, "Oh well, the kids will be disappointed." Being the sap that I am, I ask what exactly was going on downstairs. She told me there was a youth group and I was just going to go downstairs to deliver a pizza to the speaker or something. I reluctantly agreed and headed into the basement. I was expecting maybe a dozen littler kids, like 8 to 10 years old. I get downstairs and the place is packed with teenagers. Probably 20 to 30 kids down there, all chattering and stuff, evidently waiting for me. When they finally noticed me, the room exploded with energy and everyone started chanting, "Pizza, pizza." Thoroughly confused, I make my way to the guy with a microphone. He asks me my name and I tell him, and the crowd starts chanting it. The guy informs me that I just won the Pizza Olympics, hangs a medal around my neck, with a pizza picture taped onto said medal, and a volleyball trophy that looked like the person was serving a little black box. Crowd goes bananas again. I'm utterly confused and make my way back upstairs as they keep cheering. The lady upstairs thanks me, and I go back to the store, trophy and medal in hand. I still have the medal, the trophy got misplaced at the store sadly. Every time I tell the story, people think I was an absolute fool, which I was, because it seemed like an obvious kidnapping trap, right? I'm so thankful it wasn't. I'm not sure I'll be able to top that one. In short, got invited into a basement of a nice house, might have been kidnapped, got a trophy instead. I was a pizza delivery boy back in high school. I was delivering on Super Bowl Sunday during my senior year, and one of the houses I delivered at felt bad for me. They told me to come in and watch the game, so I stayed there for a while. I watched a full quarter before going back to work. I knew I was leaving for college soon enough anyway, so the possibility of getting fired didn't faze me. As a side note, my boss asked me what happened, I told him the truth, and he kept me around. I continued working there on breaks from college, and 15 years later, I'm still friendly with my old boss. He works at the same pizza place, and I go there with my family sometimes. I was delivering pizza once in a pretty sketchy neighborhood, and I came up to a gated apartment complex where I saw a guy waving me down. Sometimes customers in apartment complexes used to meet us outside if they knew their complex was complicated, so I'm thinking, what a nice guy. Turns out, I was horribly wrong. I let this complete rando into my car who reeks of liquor and cigarettes. I somehow get the words out, "Hey man, is this your pizza?" The guy is barely coherent and responds with, "No, I just need a ride." I'm freaking out at this point and wondering when the weapons or threats are going to come out, and I nervously respond with, "Dude, I totally would, but I can't. I've got pizzas to deliver. Look, check it out." He keeps asking, and I just keep repeating myself saying if I wasn't working, I'd totally help him out. I'm going to get fired. And after about 10 minutes, the guy stumbles out of my car and goes on his merry way. So freaky lesson learned, double check before letting drunk strangers into your car. I made one pizza delivery out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere. The driveway had one of those partial fences that was basically just a corner of fencing on either side of the driveway, and both sides of it had a "Beware of Dog" sign on it. As I pulled up, I could have sworn I saw two glowing red eyes at the end of the driveway in the darkness past the end of my headlights. I was thinking, damn, that's got to be one big dog. But that was that. Most of the large dogs I've known were cool, and I had to deliver the pizza either way. So as I get out and go into the back seat to get the pizza bag, I hear what I can only describe as stampeding footsteps. I already had my hand on the bag, so I grabbed it and moved it out of the way. I swear on my life a full-grown goat jumped horns first into my back seat and just sat there like, "I'm going for a ride." I struggled, pulling on his horns, timidly at first and then using a little more force. After about 10 minutes, I hear a loud, low voice say, "Hey, have you seen my goat?" I told him it was in my back seat. This very large Native American guy used one hand and yanked the goat out of my car. He tipped me almost the full price of his check for my troubles. It was pretty strange. In short, delivered a pizza and had a goat jump in the back of my car. Struggled with the stubborn thing until its owner dragged it out. Great tip though. What can you do that screams, "I make terrible financial decisions"? Oh, we've been dating for 3 months. Of course, let's join bank accounts. You know those ads on Craigslist that are trying to sell a car for exactly what they paid for it? Yeah, those. Take over my payments, please. I used to work at GameStop. I had a customer that bought a PlayStation because a particular exclusive game came out for it. Then they'd trade the system and game back in to buy an Xbox when a new exclusive came out for that about a month later, and would go back and forth trading the respective consoles and games in every few months. I tried to convince him just to own each system and buy the games for each when they release, because he was losing so much money doing what he was doing. His response was that he couldn't afford to buy both at the same time. I didn't have the brightest customers. I worked at a store called Vintage Stock. It's a lot like GameStop. We had people that did that for us too. We were in the same strip mall as GameStop, and we paid out less cash than they did. A guy came in saying he was playing our system by buying our cheap crap and selling it to GameStop, like buying a used PlayStation 4 from us for like $300 and selling it to GameStop for like $100 instead of to us for $80. Like, you didn't make $20, you spent $200, dude. What the frick? Buying something really expensive like a motorcycle or a nice rifle, and then deciding you're tired of it and reselling it for half the price only a week later. I knew a guy who did exactly that, and it was astonishing. It's like, dude, you just lost thousands. Introduce me to this guy. We're into the same stuff, and I love a good deal. When you ask them how much they paid for something, and they only know how much it costs them in monthly payments. This is a great example. I didn't realize how many people must do this. I bought a truck years ago, and after test driving it, I told the salesperson that I'd buy it if, after my trade-in, the loan on the new truck was $10K or less. He agreed. They wrote up my paperwork, and they said, "Hey, the payment is only X amount. That's less than what you were looking for. Isn't that great?" So I replied, "Yeah, but what's the total loan amount?" "Oh, I don't know. I'd have to look." So he digs through the documents, and the loan was like $12K. I pretty much told them to get bent or take $2K off that loan amount. They ended up dropping it down to the $10K I'd told them I was willing to pay. I'm assuming, however, that many people wouldn't have given the loan amount a second thought after hearing the payment was lower than they were expecting. This is why the narrator runs all of his biggest financial decisions past other, smarter humans before he commits. I'm too dumb to be trusted with this sort of thing, but also smart enough to know that I'm too dumb. If a deal seems too good to be true, check it with a smart person. And when salespeople offer you something like this, put your hands over your ears and sing loudly. So, I worked at a grocery store for 8 years, and the one thing I saw a lot of, unfortunately, was people putting food back for cigarettes when they had kids. We didn't sell lottery tickets or alcohol, but other stores in town did, and I heard the same stories from them. I worked at a store that people could sell their nerdy stuff, like games, comics, old toys, and movies in, for a little bit of cash or for even more store credit. Too often, you'd have people that reeked of crystal or cigarettes selling their kids' movies. When I'd tell them that for their collection of 10 children's movies, I'd give them $4 cash or $6 store credit, they'd usually say something like, "Give me the cash. I gotta get smokes and I don't get paid for a few more days." I'm like, what the frick? It just makes me so sad to know that a child is being raised into that. I am a loan officer. A guy called in, 18, fresh out of high school, first job, Pizza Hut, been at it 3 months. Needed a car. Wanted us to finance it. He was calling from the Maserati dealership. Jesus Christ! I know a guy who makes $80K a year, military pension, couple of private pensions, and has a Porsche for the weekends. And he still thinks Maserati is too expensive. When someone emphasizes how much they saved versus how much they spent. Look what I got. Originally 25 grand, but I got it for 5 grand. I saved 20 grand. No, you spent 5 grand. In Western Australia, it looks like this. Get laid off by the mining company that was initially paying you well, specifically because it wasn't a secure position, but never mind that. They'd already taken out like $600K loan on a house, an $80K loan on a sick V8 Commodore, plus another $10K putting in performance cams and straight through exhaust so you can pull mad skids, and this is all on the justification that I'll be able to smash those loans out in a couple of years on the salary, eh? Oh, frick. Got laid off. What do I do now? Oh, what's that? Tickets to Bali, a $300 return? Better take the family for a booze-fueled cheap crap buying bonanza. That's fine, we'll just remortgage the house. Dead frickin' easy. I used to live paycheck to paycheck. Now I live direct deposit to direct deposit. Cadillac Escalade that never has more than a quarter tank of gas. 20 grand in credit card debt at nearly 20% APR. I used to know a guy who was renowned for making bad decisions in general. To be fair, he was funny and had a heart of gold, he just wasn't a logical thinker. He never had any savings, he was always buying his girlfriend of the month pretty or expensive things, and always mooching off his mum. One of the more flawed decisions that always stuck with me was when his car broke down. It was a piece of junk, so it was bound to happen. No biggie. He was feeling pretty blue because, as well as a collection of other things that had happened around the same time, largely through his own choices. So he decided that in order to finally become a winner, he needed to look and feel like a winner. And do you know what makes you look and feel like a winner? Owning a brand new Chrysler. He was so excited about it, he could feel good things coming his way already. He picked the one he wanted, it was 70 grand Australian dollars. He spoke to the dealer and organised when he was going to come in and do the paperwork. Everything was looking great for him. Then, when he went to the dealership to sort it all out, it turned out he hadn't been in his current job for long enough, so the loan, which he'd elected to do through the dealership, couldn't be approved. He came back looking pretty defeated, but in my opinion, being declined that loan was one of the luckiest things to happen to him. That man should not be in charge of his own money. When they're always broke, but they always have green herb at the same time. Carrying forward debt from your last car loan into your current car loan. Unwilling to write down what they wrote checks for. My boss's charity just sent out the legally required receipts for charitable donations. Each receipt says, "Thank you for your donation of X amount to charity name." It's so that people can list it as a charitable donation on their taxes, so we have a list in the event of an audit. I fielded no fewer than a dozen calls this week along the lines of, "What's this receipt for? I didn't write a check." And nobody's polite about it either. They're all in full-blown panic mode. I have photocopies of their checks with the check numbers, which I send them. And suddenly they remember that check they wrote all of a week ago, but somehow never wrote down in their checkbook or whatever system they use. Seriously, people, pay attention. Asking your friends on Facebook for $250 to pay your bills, then posting the pics the next day of you at the movie theater with $40 in snacks. I have a friend who asks to borrow more than she actually needs so that she can still go out and party. For example, she might only need $200, but she'll ask for $300 so that she has an extra $100 to go buy booze and party with. And a lot of you are asking if she pays back. She's always paid me back. I'm not sure about the many others, but I wouldn't be surprised. But her payments are always late to me. It took her nearly 3 months after the date she'd told me she'd be able to pay me back the $100 I lent her. I've also witnessed her borrow money from someone to pay back someone else. I have reason to believe that she doesn't pay some of her family back like her mum or brother because they always give it to her no matter what. She always borrows money from people. It's a regular, weekly thing for her. Just bought 24-karat gold-plated playing cards. They were only $12 on Groupon, but it does look bad. I have a friend who has 95 grand in student loan debt, 23 grand credit card debt, and a 50 grand wedding on the horizon. Her dad pays for her school loan. He's paying for the wedding too. The original budget was 30 grand, got raised to 50 grand. Here's the kicker. He said, "I'll give you 50 grand for a down payment on a house or 50 grand for your wedding." And she picked the wedding. Infuriating. And yes, her dad will absolutely end up paying the down payment on her future house. It makes me just so... more money than sense. Yeah, it sure is easier to feel contempt for people who are that mix of rich, stupid, and careless with other people's money. At least when it's someone who's been stuck in a bit of a hole their entire lives, you can put it down to ignorance or maybe a lack of opportunity. But yeah, this money could have changed so many lives. Setting up a GoFundMe account to get their Facebook friends to pay for their wedding instead of opting for a simpler wedding, or having a longer engagement, or eloping now and having the big party later, while still going out to dinner every other night and taking expensive trips. Lifted truck with balding tires. Okay, this one might get ranty because I just need to vent it out. One of my colleagues is probably the nicest man on the planet. He's kind, considerate, and loyal. You couldn't write a movie script for a better person. No Rhodes Scholar, but very hardworking and liked by everyone. Almost every person in his life takes horrendous advantage of him. I can tell that he deeply fears being rejected by his loved ones and craves their approval and acceptance. But it has crossed a line. They have a joint income of over $150K, yet they're circling the drain in debt and can barely pay any bills. They live in credit. His wife is usually a decent person, but when she says jump, he asks how high. This has resulted in numerous luxury shopping trips, her mother moving in and being a complete leech on their lives, vacations, and they just had to buy 2 brand new vehicles last year with all the bells and whistles. They can barely pay the mortgage and the house is a mid-sized fixer-upper. At least every week or two he comes in and I force out of him the latest thing they spent way too much money on. Almost everything is in payment installments, even their utility bills. He pays for 5 cell phones. He usually can't drive his truck because there's no gas in it. In the summer we have barbecues every week for about $3 to $5. Hot dogs are cheaper than burgers. And there are times he just doesn't have the $3. A 45-year-old man with a 6-figure income that doesn't have $3 2 days after payday. Thankfully, his kids are clueless that there's a problem, as it should be. They're kids and don't need adult problems. They get whatever they need from school. My concern is that one day the bubble will burst. Repo companies will come in, creditors are calling, and they're precariously close to the edge at all times. All I can do is encourage him to get therapy and learn to say no. But I can't force it. Okay, update. Lots of good advice from people coming in, good to hear from other people on the other side of the fence, and it's giving me a new perspective. His youngest 2 kids are pre-teens. Not sure I want to tell them about the magnitude of the problem, just let them enjoy a few years of being kids. Second update, for frick's sake. I was chatting with him at the end of the workday. Apparently they're using the tax refund they assume they're getting, and the whole family is going to Mexico for spring break. Frick. I told him to sell his truck or find a cardboard box to live in. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Complaining on Facebook that you can't afford the $200 it will take to cover your kids' school supplies this year, but also posting a daily pic of your Starbucks drink. $800 car, $2,000 rims. Trying to pay 2 mortgages, but you also spend hundreds of dollars on video game loot boxes and virtual cards for a mobile phone game. Treating the limit on their credit card as money that they already have. For example, they have a $5,000 limit on a new card and immediately think they could buy with $5,000, and then opening a new credit card when they run out of that $5,000. I used to be a cashier at a store which had their own credit card that could only be used at that store. Most of the credit applications I processed were either denied or given very low credit limits because those cards attract people with the worst financial decisions. Get your tax refund and completely forget about the last 11 months of poverty you just experienced while you talk yourself into a brand new 65-inch TV that you'll inevitably pawn off to pay your water bill. Maybe I'm being too specific here. Buying a rundown hotel with bedbugs, mold, and a broken pool, and then spending $27,000 on new signs with over half your savings. Hotel Impossible episode that I saw recently. In my part of the world, it's the newly hired kids on the oil rigs. When the market is booming, they go out and buy a truck with a $1,000 monthly payment, then buy a house with a $3,000 monthly payment. Then, when the market drops, they lose it all and their credit ends up ruined. So it's harder to find a decent car or place to live. Okay, I'm copying in this golden oldie from the finance Reddit. I'm in high school and money was stolen from my bank account. I need help now. I'm in high school, I just finished my frosh year, and I'm supposed to go on a big trip this summer. I didn't have any money and my parents didn't want me to have a lot of cash anyway, so they set me up with my first bank account and put $1,000 in it. It came with an ATM card and some checks. The checks were really cool. I never had anything like them before. But I was kind of sad because I didn't have anything to use them for. I had a lot of friends over last week and I showed them the checks, and they all thought they were really cool too. I got the idea that I could give my friends some souvenir checks. I told them that these were only souvenirs. We had a blast that day. I was acting like a billionaire and making jokes, asking people how much money they needed, and then writing them a fake check. I kept telling them that it was all fake and they couldn't cash the checks. Because some of my friends are idiots, I got a text today from one guy saying he tried to cash a check and the bank wouldn't give him money. I told him, "What the frick are you doing trying to cash the check after I told you not to?" I went to the bank this afternoon to sort it out and I asked them how much money was in the account. They said that there was nothing left in the account and that I owed them money for fees. I felt like I was going to faint or throw up. So I got out of there as fast as I could. I didn't explain the situation to them. I need to fix this without my parents finding out. Do I talk to the police first, or do I talk to the bank first about the stolen money? I'm in Michigan, by the way. Update. Okay, thanks everyone for the advice. I still feel like I should try going to the cops, but every time I wanted to, I kept getting nervous and chickened out. That lasted about a whole day, and then it turns out my dad got a call from the bank and he went absolutely ape crap. They stopped all the checks and took my checkbook away. I have no idea if they got the money back from my friends. My dad left for work for a week and he's not talking to me. I probably won't see him for a while because I leave for my trip this week and I'll be gone for a while. I'm only getting $300 for the trip this time instead of the $1,000, but I guess that makes sense that I'm punished somehow. Biggest lesson learned? Don't mess around with the checkbook, or if you need to, make sure to write void on the checks. Well, we can give you the benefit of the doubt and put that extreme blunder down to your relative youth. Your parents probably should have given you some sort of talk about how to use a checkbook, but even then, folks, checks have signatures and stuff on them, and they're more or less a contract that you're giving the other party that money. Don't be silly with them, he says in 2025 when nobody uses checks anymore. Rent-a-center. Heard a coworker talking about their new bong, and she showed me a picture of it on a table with burn marks. I asked why it was so burnt, and she said, rent-a-center's on my butt because I haven't paid yet, but I don't want to. I shouldn't have to pay for a burnt table. I replied, why would they even rent it to you like that? And she says, well, they're buttholes. I told them I burnt it and they won't even give me a discount or anything. They want more. This witch's new glass pipe cost more than a table I now own off Craigslist, and she's $200 in debt for a table that she can't even keep. I still think about that interaction maybe twice a week. When you're part of a multi-level marketing company and you, quote, own your own business. Bonus points for using guilt. In college, I was always behind on my rent because I'd spend all of my money on green herb and Italian cheese bread from Little Caesars. I'd get super baked, get the munchies, and order an Italian cheese bread. This was a daily thing for years, and I eventually got evicted. I must have spent close to 50 grand on Mary J and Italian cheese bread by my sophomore year. Anyways, that's not my answer. My sister owns a Coach purse. Eating out for lunch every single day and complaining about how poor or broke you are. No crap, Sandra, was that peanut and chicken kale salad with a side of pasta and extra bakery treat really worth it? Brand new car, no savings, putting things on credit because they don't have money for it. Buying things you don't really need just because it's on sale. And to clarify, I'm talking about non-necessity items. Food, hygiene products and stuff are a good idea to buy when it's on sale even if you don't need them at the moment. Questioning you on savings. When you let a friend know how much you have saved and they ask you why you aren't spending more, because if I spent it, I wouldn't have any saved. That's how frickin' savings work. Recently got in an argument with a friend about this. They accidentally saw my bank statement. My fault, I forgot to put it away before they came to my place. Since they discovered what I have in savings, they're always going back to it when I refuse an activity because I find that activity too expensive. I'm saving to pay for driving lessons and then buy a new car. To me, this money isn't mine. It's the dealerships and driving instructors, so I can't spend it. I even tried to explain that to them that it's to pay for future debts, like credit and reverse, because sometimes weird stuff works, and they still don't understand the concept. When someone rents an apartment in a crap part of town, but drives a very expensive car with a stereo setup that you can hear, nay, feel from half a mile away. A guy that I worked with, he sold his phone to pay his rent. He got like $40 for it. Spent the next month without a phone, unable to do business properly because he didn't have a way for people to contact him. He told me he was short on rent and living check to check every month. Later, he told me he plans on taking out a $4,000 loan. $2,000 of it were to buy an old car he liked, and the other $2,000 was to revamp it. He decided he wanted to start breeding pit bulls, so he paid $300 for a pit bull that then didn't mate with his female and was later run over. He decided to buy 2 Indian ringnecks, birds, just because. He wanted a pet and then had to buy a proper cage and toys, and now has to buy bird food and generally do upkeep on them. He later sold one to cover his rent. He also told me multiple stories about how whenever he came up with some extra cash, he'd spend it by the next day. He was proud of this too. He told me how he once got $100 from a family member and then used it within the same night to have a steak dinner and go out for dessert afterwards. When customers would leave him tips, he'd use it to buy takeout food that night. He bought a cat. Full stop. And when he eventually got a phone, he bought one for about $500, which was more than his paycheck. He told me he once wanted to give his wife money, but she told him to keep it because she didn't want to spend it, so he literally just threw it away. Those people who never buy groceries and buy every meal and snack as they please. Anytime I see someone who makes less than $25K a year buy a brand new car rather than a well-cared-for used one, I judge them just a bit. I work at the bank. Literally 95% of people's expenses come from food and eating out. Now, that doesn't mean that someone is necessarily financially illiterate, but by simply making their own food and getting a coffee machine, most people can save the majority of their paychecks. Also, having a credit card that offers no rewards. There's so many with no annual fee. Get one of those instead. Full-time students on financial aid who buy Starbucks every single morning, and not just coffee, it's always lattes and frappuccinos and crap. What stupid question earned someone in your class the dunce cap? In class, we were discussing the hole in the ozone layer. Some girl just blurts out, "Oh, that's the hole that the space shuttle flies through, right?" Wait, so the British were fighting for England? This was during a Western civilizations course. We were talking about the moon in our 10th grade class, and this girl goes, "Is there still a moon?" The teacher's just like, "Oh, what? Do we still have a moon?" And the whole class was silent. Biology teacher says, "Look at the person sitting next to you. You share 99% of your DNA with them." Student goes, "Oh my god, is that why you did the seating chart this way?" That's stunningly hilarious. I can't even feel like facepalming like with the rest of these. Just, oh my god. The amount of credit that guy was willing to give his teacher? Wow. In my 10th grade history class, we were talking about when George Washington had 4 bullet holes in his coat jacket and 2 horses shot out from under him. So the teacher asked if anybody knew which battle this happened in, and this girl in my class raises her hand and says, "Vietnam." I was honestly impressed with how stupid she was. We were learning about the events leading up to World War II at Hebrew school in 6th grade. The teacher said, "The Jews were killed by the thousands." And I crap you not, a girl in class asked, "Who are the thousands?" Is a walrus an animal? I had to explain to basically 75% of a science class in high school that ants were in fact animals. They didn't believe me, so I had them go to the teacher. They were shocked bugs were in fact animals. I think a lot of people get confused between an animal and a mammal. I've heard a lot of people who say fish aren't animals or lizards aren't animals as well, so there's obviously some lapse in education there. Somebody in my class once asked if the plural to moose was meese, to which one girl replied, "Mooses aren't even real, why does it matter?" And I will never forget the look on the teacher's face, which was just the vibe of pure loathing. Well, let's be fair to him, it's not often that you're drastically confronted with your failure as an educator. It can't be easy for that guy. During my sophomore year of high school, I was in human anatomy. We were talking about how baby's gender is determined, and a girl asked, "If 2 lesbians have a baby, does it automatically come out a girl?" She was dead serious. Topic question was, how would you survive without water if stranded in the middle of the ocean? And this girl in class says, "Oh, that's a dumb question. I'd just put the ocean water in a cup, and then the salt would just evaporate." Probably the most vivid moment I remember from all of high school. Wait, volcanoes are real? I thought they were just made up. This was a high school freshman, by the way. High school chemistry class, we were working on a lab where we had to make little squares on a piece of plastic to perform tests in, and the squares had to have 2-centimeter long sides. This kid at my lab table, who'd already proven to be not so bright in class many times beforehand, got our teacher's attention and then asked what a centimeter was. After the teacher thoroughly explained what a centimeter was and where exactly to find them on the ruler in front of him, the student turned to us and said, "I still don't understand this centimeter thing." I'm a high school teacher. We were discussing if you would be a different person if your parents named you differently. A clearly green herb medicated student finds out I have a first name and is shocked, then proceeds to ask, "Wait, Mrs. Milkweed, what's your last name?" College sociology class. I don't remember how it came up. A girl wanted to know whether the Earth is a planet. Back in my high school history class, we were discussing the Vietnam War, and I raised my hand and asked, "Who's Agent Orange?" thinking it was a person. Astronomy class test review with about 500 students, discussing what wavelengths of light make it to the Earth's surface from the sun. A girl raised her hand and asked, "Where does the visible light go at night?" Completely seriously. The professor, in shock, replied, "The other side of the earth." In my world history class, did food exist back then? I feel like this question had to have just come out wrong. There is absolutely no way that this was a legitimate question, and if it was, life must be very hard for that poor person. Is Australia in Europe? And no, the boy who asked this question did not mean Austria, he meant Australia. He said it 3 times. I was in a history class in community college and we were discussing New York City's role in the Revolutionary War. The teacher had been referring to the English as the British and the English interchangeably, and after a while one kid raised his hand and asked, "Are the British and the English on the same side? Because I always thought the Revolutionary War was America versus Britain versus England." And the kid was dead serious. It was a 100-level class, but come on, seriously? I was in a class once when this girl, in the middle of a lecture, interrupted by pointing to the map on the wall that had America in the center, asking why there were 2 Russias, one on each side of the world. That particular part of the world had to be divided to each side to accommodate the US's central positioning on that map. This was college, mind you. A girl in high school earth science class felt compelled to ask the following: where does the sun go at night? How many seconds are in a meter? In my high school earth science class, we were talking about the origin of the moon. One girl asks, "Did people live on the moon back then?" "So, do you speak like Portuguese?" in response to me telling a girl in her mid-20s that I was from Portland, Oregon. This happened today, and it hurts to think about. So, is Alaska a state, or are you just messing with me? I mean, I know someone who thinks there are 52 states. There are 50 states including Alaska and Hawaii, which means there are 52. And he continued this belief even after being proven wrong. Teacher said, "Your essay needs to be 1,000 words." A student immediately put their hand up. "Is a semicolon a word?" I'm like, is illegal good or bad? I always get them confused. The same girl was asked on a health test to name 3 common bedroom transmissible diseases and said, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, needles, and downstairs fluids. This girl got into university. Is Mars a country? I mean, I hear they import some good chocolate from Mars. Freshman in bio at college. Having to do some simple stoichiometry for finding out how much of a particular chemical is produced in some cycle, I can't remember which one. Wait, 0.5 and half are the same thing? Wait, what? Jesus Christ, no wonder I failed every equation I've done since the 7th grade. I thought this was going to be a video on stupid people, not things that even very smart people like me don't know. We were in Year 9 chemistry and were discussing things like how everything kinda can become a solid if you go below a certain temperature. This one kid, who was the top of the class in chemistry and physics, sat there pondering, thinking about this stunning revelation. Solid air? Solid helium? In the end, he raises his hand with the stunned look of someone who had just discovered the Higgs boson and asks the life-changing question. Does that mean, like, can you get solid water? It was me. Girl in my 12th grade French class once asked, "Why would I want to go to another country when Paris is in America?" 9th grade English teacher was collecting food and stuff to send it to Japan after the tsunami, namely rice. A girl raised her hand and asked if it was to soak up all of the water. The teacher's look of disappointment could be felt down to her soul. We had a Native American speaker come to my world religions class one day. He spoke to us about how missionaries came to his reservation and nearly destroyed their culture and livelihood. He brought up how depressing and difficult it is to live in the US. Then a girl raises her hand and asks, "Well, if you don't like it here, why don't you just leave and go to a different country?" We were discussing forest fires that were going on somewhere in the Midwest at the time, and a girl asked, "How can the fires keep burning for more than one day? Do they start back up again every morning?" She literally thought the fires only burn in the daytime. This was in a college class. In a life skills class, and we'd just finished watching the horror show that is the assortment of slides showing different transmissible diseases. The teacher proceeds to show us how to put a Johnny on what can only be described as a banana-themed marital aid. After he'd finished, he solemnly asks if anyone has any questions. At first, no hands go up as everyone in the room is in voiceless agreement that the sooner this ordeal is over, the better. Suddenly, I see a hand slowly raise itself. It's attached to the really weird Asian kid. We all had one. His words, while bizarre and cause for extreme condemnation, cut through the awkwardness like a hot knife through the lubricant on slide 4. Where can I get one of those banana things from? We had a very serious, pretty uninformative life skills class going on. We did a section on gay bedroom activities, and it's clear the teacher isn't really comfortable, and all the kids are kind of blushing and giggling. Finally, at the end of class, teacher asks if there are any questions. A kid raises his hand and, with a totally straight face, says, "I heard if 2 gay guys are doing the deed and the one in front toots, the other one blows up." I've never seen a classroom descend into chaos that quickly. Another one in health class, grade 10, guest speaker talking about oxytocin. Explains oxytocin is the love hormone that allows you to form a connection with another person. And a kid asks, "So when you tickle your pickle, do you fall in love with yourself?" And I immediately lost it, laughing so hard. Then the kid threatened to fight me. It was a good day. But wait, aren't Canadians from Canada? In a graduate-level computer science class during a lecture on memory allocation, "I'm sorry, what's a byte?" You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. High school. Aren't the Greeks and Romans the same thing? No. Oh, awkward. Goes back to playing Plants vs. Zombies on his phone. But if evolution is true, why don't squirrels give birth to chipmunks? I broke my pencil in half upon hearing that particular gem. Second semester of Spanish, prepping for the midterm. Teacher says, "Now is the time to ask any questions you're unsure of." Girl in the front row goes, "Is there a difference between L and La?" The teacher just didn't know what to do. "So, were the dinosaurs before or after the Greeks?" Guys, this girl had never gone to church in her whole life, and we were taught that the Earth is more than 6,000 years old or whatever. Massachusetts public schools for the win. This was a 10-question open notes take-home quiz in my college sociology class. Some girl asked, "Am I going to fail this test because I got half the questions wrong?" The professor's reaction was essentially just the emoji angry face. I was in 8th grade. A kid asked what Thomas Edison did during the Revolutionary War. That kid wasn't too bright. These 2 gems came from the same person. Is a 20-minute shower long? And is Egypt a religion? We were talking about galaxies and how they form, and as the teacher was talking about how they form, one girl slowly raises her hand. She's asked some stupid crap before, so the teacher calls her name with a tangible amount of reluctance and dread, and this girl asks, "If you throw a peanut out into the universe, will it eventually become a galaxy of its own?" The teacher had a hard time trying to stay nice to her after that question. We had 2 guys from the University Student Association come into our chemistry lecture promoting an event, and they had free tickets to give away, so one of them tried to come up with a chemistry-related question. He came up with, "How many atoms in hydrogen?" The lecturer had to explain to this guy that hydrogen was an atom. He meant how many atoms in hydrogen, like how many atoms in a water molecule, the human body, or a badger. In college intro to astronomy class, the girl up front responded with 2 miles when the professor asked the class for the diameter of the Earth. I'm fairly certain any end-to-end measurement of our university exceeded 2 miles. The entire class laughed at her, which is what she deserved. Maybe she was just more used to the metric system. But yeah, even the hardest proponent of kilometers would know that the conversion to miles isn't roughly a 6,500th. What's the difference between fish and mammals? That's the final year of university, biology major in a class called Vertebrate Evolution. Everyone I tell this story to says it makes them feel a little happier. In middle school history, we were watching a film on Lewis and Clark. The narrator said something like, "And there the explorers stopped and drank from the ice-cold water." One of the guys in my class asks aloud, "Did they know what ice was back then?" I asked him if this was before or after the Great Ice Age. My friend, a teacher, had a 15-year-old girl ask him who the current president was. In a big hall sociology class, we were learning about social mores. A student asked, "Is that what the song's about?" What song?" "When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's a more?" Entire class was staring in stunned silence at this new stupidity. Then the professor does the kid the biggest solid I've ever seen by saying, "Very funny." But then the student wouldn't drop it and says he wasn't joking. Professor says, "Trust me, you're joking," and the class is in uproarious laughter. So, what was the homework? This was less than 5 seconds after the homework was announced and the professor wrote it on the board. Every gosh darn class. High school freshman history class. The class was watching a movie about the events leading up to the outbreak of World War II. During the film, a shot from a newsreel featuring a fat, bald Asian man waving to the camera is shown. At this moment, a girl in the class asks loudly, "Is that the name of the leader of the Third Reich?" And the room goes silent. The teacher pauses the film from his seat at his desk, walks to the front of the class, in front of the TV screen, and stands there. He looks to the girl, an emotionless stare on his face. He stays there for a moment, then he casts his gaze to the floor, shakes his head, and turns to walk back to his desk. The video is then resumed without comment. My girlfriend, student teachers. She was explaining to her 7th graders some of the basic rules, including water is the only beverage allowed in the classroom, no soda, no tea, no energy drinks, only water. And some kid asked her, "What about invisible Kool-Aid?" Like, not even joking, just straight up serious. I think he still gives her nightmares. Halfway through the semester in my linear algebra class, we were solving some system, and a guy seemed absolutely astounded that you could add 2 equations together. I believe his exact words were, "You can do that? Just add equations together?" Keep in mind that most people learn how to do that in 10th grade. It's even funnier because he was actually a really smart guy. I'm just not sure if everything was working in his head on that day, though. Grade 11 university-level biology. A girl kind of known for being occasionally dim explains, "Wait, people actually die from acquired immune deficiency syndrome?" Needless to say, all of us, including the teacher, died a little inside that day. And also, before anyone says it, I do know that people usually die from infections that the weakened immune system caused by acquired immune deficiency syndrome allows, but she wasn't referring to that. She was shocked that this thing she kept hearing about was actually a death sentence to so many people. She was not saying this because she was getting technical and demonstrating knowledge. She legitimately understood the acronym of that aforementioned disease to just be some sort of serious flu. She had no idea that it causes millions of deaths. Now, given that this was in the 8th grade, but nevertheless, a girl asked me how to spell GPS. Yes, English is her first language, and yes, she still takes crap for it 5 years later. Me, speaking to a student. I say, "Can you please plug this power extension into the wall?" Which end?" "Wait, are you serious? I get confused." "The pointy end goes in the wall." It should be noted I was working at a university at the time, and this student was 18 years old. English class focusing on comedy. This girl comes to class blazed, can't stop laughing, is super disruptive, and then decides to ask, "What is truth?" Which, this is a lower div English class. We don't have time for your green herb-induced philosophical problems. "Can I go to the bathroom?" "This is college, you idiot. Of course you can." In my world history class, we were talking about the Egyptians, and my teacher made a joke about how one of the pharaohs looked like he was an alien that had been sent to rule the people. A girl then asked how the aliens got to Earth because there was no technology back in that time period, right? Everyone did a facepalm and an "Are you frickin' serious right now?" look. Why did they split the 13 colonies up into 50 states? This was in college. At the Jewish History Museum on an excursion, somebody interrupted the guide while they were explaining the Passover meal. Why do Jews do communion when they don't believe in Jesus who invented it? In Earth Science class in 9th grade. If the sun is so hot, how come the tape measure doesn't melt when we measure the distance from the Earth to the sun? In 9th grade biology, how are deer made out of meat if they eat grass all day? Yeah. When talking about the war in Iraq during class, a girl asked, "Is Islam near Iraq?" We'd just discovered World War II in advanced placement US history, and a reasonably intelligent guy asked when Napoleon got involved. When we laughed, he asked if we'd already covered him, and we explained, yes, 142 years prior with the Louisiana Purchase. My friend, who's basically a World War II buff, and doesn't every school have one, was just busting a gut, and this otherwise smart kid just sat back down with a perplexed and humbled look on his face. I mean, we've all gotten a name mixed up before. I think it's a fair bet that that's what happened here. because the only other alternative is this guy believing that blue-coated, musket-armed guardsmen were being strafed by Messerschmitt Bf-109s and run over by tanks, which is hilarious, but not a thing that happened. A senior girl in Trig when I was in sophomore asked what 0.5 was as a fraction because she forgot. It's a good thing she's pretty. In 2013, is the President of Canada Barack Obama? I don't even. In my Geography of Africa class, a girl asked, "Why do Africans always complain about not having water? It's not like they live in houses. Can't they just move their shacks closer to water?" And I couldn't even. A girl in my high school asked my teacher if America was a subset of the United States and where it was located. 2 years later in government class, this same girl was also surprised to find out that England is on an island and not connected to the rest of Europe. I cringed really hard at a work meeting the other day. The manager said, "We've been thinking about hiring some temps to help with the workload, and if the load doesn't lighten after 6 months, we'll keep the best ones on as permanent staff." Lucas said, "Well, how much will the temps really do though, since they ain't getting paid?" He was thinking of the word intern, but it made him look especially stupid because he came to us from a temp agency. What happens if you put a bag of fries in an air conditioner? It was a thermal physics course, and the kids struggled for years to graduate with a physics degree. Alas, the professors always found his understanding merited an F. Okay, maybe not the worst, but a girl in my class continually asks if she can take a new page in her book when writing down notes. She's 15. In high school, how can evolution be true? That's like saying a black person and a white person are related. They can't be related, they have completely different skin. Yes, that was a question that was asked this decade. When exactly was the War of 1812 again? What food group does potpourri belong in? Have you been eating potpourri? My sophomore year of college, I took a biology class. The professor asked, "Can anyone give me an example of something hydrophobic?" This kid in the front raised his hand and said, "Cats." It's not what the teacher was looking for, but I guess it's true and it got a lot of laughs. Wait a minute. Flamingos have 2 legs? Hackers, when did you stumble into something that made you GTFO? A couple of years back, I was really big into reactivating old Hotmail accounts and using them to log into Facebook. Since this was in the heyday of chainmails with 100 or so accounts there, I had a huge backlog to get through. I don't know why I did it. It was a combination of boredom and voyeurism, I think, and lots of free time. I felt like a sort of hacker at least. Occasionally, you stumble upon things you wish you weren't supposed to. I mean, yeah, I know how that sounds. Once, I came upon a guy's Facebook, and after a while I realized it hasn't been used in years. A bit like coming across an abandoned house. Tons of notifications and unopened PMs. On top of the list of those messages, it was a woman that kept trying to contact him. My first impression was that it was a stalker, maybe an ex that wasn't able to move on. I don't really want to go into details because even for me it felt like I'd walked into an absolutely private matter. But it was mostly her talking about her day-to-day stuff and occasionally begging him to come back. Sometimes it got real weird with her telling him how she felt him in the wind. Turns out the guy was dead and people have strange ways of coping. I left that habit behind after that. Just imagine being that woman and coming back to find your messages read. That would really mess me up good for a couple of days. Yeah, that's what I thought. I might be a creep and a voyeur, but I made sure I set those messages back to unread before leaving. I was asked to steal a couple of Bitcoin from a customer's associate back when Bitcoin and altcoins were booming. I got access to his wallet fairly easily, being curious as I am, and I also checked out how he got so much coin. He had tons of small sum payments with links attached to the transactions. I checked one, and it was just illegal videos containing unwilling participants. I'm not talking a few grand in Bitcoin in this guy's wallet, but closer to 6 to 7 figures. Just hundreds and hundreds of small $50 to $1,000 transactions. It was sickening. Lots and lots of the worst sort of illegal adult films. I told the guy I was working for that his associate was a frickin' predator and quickly dropped a line to the relevant authorities. Stuff like that screws you up, man. In short, I was asked to gain access to a Bitcoin wallet, checked the transactions, and they were selling real messed up and illegal stuff. Got hired through a website where someone wanted me to gain access to a kid's computer who doxed him. Got into it and found out that he was looking up recipes for explosives. I turned him in and noped out of there. And I've had a few others where I found the same sort of awful material we talked about in the last story. It's way too common. Yeah, the narrator has just realized that there's going to have to be some careful placement and selection here, because, surprise, the people being hacked often have the same stuff that they want kept secret for the sake of self-preservation on their PCs. I should have guessed that one. Many long years ago, there was this website called Aeon8. It was basically just a weird ambiguous splash page with a countdown timer and a map with red dots all over it. This thing was super effective at rustling the jimmies of the entire internet. I found a way in relatively early, and based on a few things I found in the web root, it immediately became obvious that the whole thing was a prank, so I decided to leave it alone and just watch it play out. Right at the very end of the countdown, the guy that was running the whole thing updated the website with his big reveal, including some message about how the hackers from all over the world kept trying to break in, but none could manage it, and called us all lame noobs. I was a bratty teenager, so I took that as a challenge. I was on a teleconference with some other hackers at the time, so we jumped on that server through a back door I'd left and defaced the page with the message, "The internets will never be safe," and a few more choice but cringe words. Anyway, right around this time, as the countdown ended and for a while after, the server was getting swamped to the point of an essential DDoS. This was happening while I was logged into SSH on the server. I was in the process of doing some cleanup, deleting some utility scripts I'd put out on the server, but I was impatient. The lag was grueling and I was working faster than the server was sending me responses. I changed directories at one point and tried to delete everything in it before seeing a response from the server and didn't realize that I'd fat-fingered the cd command. I ended up deleting a bunch of this guy's stuff that I didn't even mean to. The second I realized what I'd done, I instantly felt horrible and noped the F out of there. We'd planned on razzing the guy for a while, but I was just totally done. I was hired to develop a payment processor for an unnamed large fast food brand. At this point, I had the ability to take out $100,000 a day into an offshore account. I would have done this by pulling a movie plot like a heist. I was going to take 2% of all tax payments. I was thinking about it for a while, and then the next day, someone I knew was busted for doing the same thing on a much smaller brand. At this point, I dipped out. I ended up working for the brand for a few more years without committing fraud. Not really serious hacking, but back in the day I wrote a Trojan that would steal user account info and CD keys from Diablo 2, which I would sell later on eBay for sweet, sweet cash. I would proxy between the connection of the client and server, and while the user was in the chat room on the realm, it would spam download links for the Trojan and subsequently hide the messages from anyone infected so they wouldn't suspect anything. This made it self-spreading, and it was actually so effective that eventually Blizzard put up a warning about it on their website. I took down the sites hosting it at that point since I was scared and didn't want it to get traced back to me. My old boss asked me to find the personal data of somebody that he'd met at a hotel for reasons. I explained that I was unlikely to be able to do it untraceably, explained social engineering, explained that I was no good at social engineering, and noped the F out. Let him try. KPP on iOS. I'm not even going to try to find a way around that thing. I worked for a company that was selling people's data in the early 2010s. They had about 6 million leads. I dropped the database before I left. I hope that company collapsed the next morning. Not really a hack. The school IT department were idiots and left the password to the main account hard-coded in a batch script. I went in and found out all the teachers' pay, the students' names, addresses, social security numbers, just to name a few. Nope, 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 out, out, out. I like finding insecure IP cameras, mostly the ones with no password or the default password, and then log into them wherever they are. A lot are in houses, some are in kids' rooms or whatever. I honestly never tend to keep any open long enough to see people. One was just in a random house, in the front room, and there was someone on the sofa. After a few minutes, they got up and were completely starkers. I realized this was somewhat problematic and never went back to that one. I was at a Counter-Strike LAN party ages ago. I ran a bunch of NetSend scripts on the network, causing prompts to pop up in the front of the game saying dumb stuff like, "Good luck, right behind you," or "Your mother gives great down-under kisses." Eventually, the party organizer paused the games to walk everyone through how to disable messaging services. The funny thing was that about 15% of the people already had that off, including my group, and it caused a few unfair wins. I noped out when people started looking at me since I wasn't exactly quiet about the whole thing. It was frickin' amazing, and the start of a long, long road of engineering and InfoSec work. This was back in the day of AIM and chat rooms. I had a guy I was watching in a chat room. I sent him a message acting as someone significantly younger than me. Told him to download my naughty pictures. He did, and it was just a quick download that gave me access to the entire system. The tool I used displayed the entire system and all functions in a hierarchy of importance with the Windows kernel at the tippy top. As soon as I was all set, I deleted his kernel. I lost all of my tools from back then, but that was a sweet time to be around. Seek and destroy internet predators. Script Kitty College me decided to play with a pen testing program against a government website from the school network. The amount of network info and other metadata, as well as actual documents it was pulling, was scary. Plus, it was overheating my rig because of the processing power involved, and just overall I realized this was a crappy idea, so I killed it. I crashed a print daemon on a sprint net, times 0.25, connected system, thereby freezing and crashing the whole mainframe. Never reconnected again because I was afraid there'd be monitoring. This was like in 1991, you whippersnappers. This message means absolutely zippy-doo to the narrator, but I hope that at least one old-school hacker from 30 years back saw this and got a quick chuckle from the memories. We try to cater to all tastes here on the channel. Back in middle school, I used a VNC to hack all of the school computers. I had a free lesson, so I went to the computer lab, or whatever they called it back then. I connected to the internet, ran Angry IP Scanner, which was a great tool by the way, and picked a random computer. Now, for those non-hackers, a VNC basically allows you to connect to a different person's PC and control and monitor it. As soon as I connected to this guy's computer, I just saw adult material all over the screen. Like quite specific interest stuff. Not your run-of-the-mill mom-and-pop smut. The reason why this was so weird was that everyone there was like 11, 12, 13, 14, and all of that stuff was never talked about in the school. Reading this, I think the best thing about hackers is that they can be moral. Keep up the good fight, guys. When I was young, I got into hacking AOL for cool screen names. I met people who social engineered AOL. They'd call up AOL and pretend their system, Merlin, was down, and trick real employees into resetting stuff. It was on the converse call when they stole the owner of AOL's account, as well as those of other high-ranking figures at the company. A couple of years later, me and my fellow hackers were all friends, playing Halo and stuff together. They told me to connect to this live server, that you could control the mouse, and they hacked the Comcast website and wanted me to connect to it. I had this weird gut feeling to ask what it was for once, and they told me. I said, hell to the no. Also, these same people had a botnet channel. I was in it back in the day, and a government cybercrimes agent came in and told us to shut it down. I was like 14, so I was terrified that I was going to juvie. But now I work in systems admin and have a good job, so I'm kind of thankful that I wandered into that AOL chat back in the day. It made me the person that I am now. Pretty deep into the dark web for work, looking for certain things, came across certain adverts on darknet search websites that made me leave work until the next day. Noped the frick out of there. I would prefer not to say what it was, but you can guess. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The killer of the CMD library of Ethereum multisig wallets. Approximately couple of 100 million gone forever. So what you're saying is that you avenged all the guys unable to buy GPUs because of these miners? I would kiss you if I could. I was a spammer in the mid to late 90s. There were a group of 3 of us who'd make a website using affiliate content and then spam the link to it. Started off by spamming AOL chat rooms, and we made a decent living from it. 2 to 3 grand for each of us per week. Then we got bigger into it and left the confines of AOL, which led to bigger paydays of 20 to 30 grand per month until the authorities knocked on one of my partner's doors. They never did come to me, and I was 17 at the time, and I stopped that once that happened. Well, this isn't a life or death situation like some of the other posts here. I sniffed the credentials for our student information and grading system in high school with a program called Cain and Abel. Did nothing with it, but I could see grades, addresses, social security numbers, the works. This is more amateur teenage social engineering than pure hacking. A friend and I created an account on a French chat website. It was called Coco Chat or something like that. It was aimed at children, I think. We made our account look like we were a 9-year-old girl and just started chatting with people. Needless to say, it was pretty disturbing seeing the kind of things people wanted to talk to us about. One of them was talking almost every day with us. We even thought about sending him a keylogger or a Trojan to find out more information about him and call the cops on him. In the end, we were too disgusted and frightened by this guy to continue doing that. I was pretty good with computers as a teenager and got into hacking, so of course I decided to have a little fun on the social network. The Wi-Fi password was literally schoolmascot staff09, which was easy to crack and felt like a trap or joke. After some tinkering around trying to get into unsecured devices, I ended up gaining access to a classmate's laptop. I didn't recognize any files right away as personally identifiable until I got to a folder that said A-Push Drafts, which contained another folder that said A-Push Bibliography, which contained yet another that read A-Push Chapter Guides, and inside held one last folder that said A-Push Lecture Recordings. Thinking I'd get a leg up on some future classes, I opened one of the files. It was one of the seniors at my school dressed as George Washington, wig and all, undressing and tickling his pickle. My intent was to maybe steal some notes and make my history class a breeze, but instead I saw a guy yanking his doodle American Revolution style. I was a freshman, he was a senior, so we didn't cross paths, but his historical reenactment events sometimes pop up on my Facebook, and I am filled with horror. I wouldn't call myself a hacker, just a Google dork. I don't believe how easy it is. Just a Google search away, you can look through someone's camera. I was an early internet adopter back in the days of Slip and Trumpet Windsock. Was in a racy Usenet news group and came across about 12 images of straight-up illegal material of the sort described elsewhere here. I knew the admin for the ISP we used personally. I called him at his desk and let him know what was up. They cleaned the spool and notified the FBI, but that shook me. That was 1994, by the way. My uncle lives with his parents and everything was unsecured. Open network so any files on devices could be accessed. On his computer, the uncle cranks it to Betty, Archie, and Veronica material. I'm convinced the dark web is about 2/3 adult films themed around revenge and some more containing unwilling participants and some German lunatic talking about conspiracies. The last third is buying green herb through the mail. I had to use all of my elite hacking skills at once one time. I even got a blurry security pic but was able to zoom in and 4K that crap by saying, "Computer, enhance image." I had to type a lot very fast to get past all those firewalls. But at the end of the day, I was able to gain access to NASA and confirm that the Earth is indeed round, people. After submitting multiple bug reports to various financial organizations and cloud service providers about things like being able to bypass authentication requirements or spoof official documents, and always seeing the issue closed as working as intended, I've kind of given up on trusting anything to be secure. I managed to break my ex's father's password. While snooping through files to see what I could find, I stumbled upon folders and folders of this one guy, his wife, and various friends of theirs wearing nothing but literal number 2, going number 1 on each other. They were in their 70s, and it left me scarred. Oh boy, yeah, I don't care how much you liked that ex-partner of yours. That's not an association you can really ever just shrug off, is it? You'd need hypnotherapy or something to unsee that. I discovered that my friend's homework folder contained nothing but actual homework. It was a sad, disappointing day indeed. Working in IT for a large medical group, I found inappropriate films featuring animals on the owner's laptop, on his home computer, and office desktop. The guy was 72. Back when Kazaa was big, I downloaded a bunch of adult movies. Teen me figured since I built my own computer and bought all the parts myself that it'd be safe from my mum and her newly married husband. Wrong. He didn't hack it exactly because I had no safeguards and had nothing to hide. But when I got home, he asked me why I was watching all this animal smut. I was so confused and said I hadn't because that's gross. Came to find out, one of the videos I downloaded was labeled as regular old vanilla adult film, but it was, not. So that's pretty much when I stopped trusting peer-to-peer smut downloads. Let me give you an actual answer. Actual things I found disturbing. Professionally, I'm not a hacker, just an IT monkey. First, I'm honestly surprised that our banking system works, period. I've worked in multiple banks, and frankly, I'm surprised their systems work at all. Some servers are 20 years old, some don't have a working DR solution, some are using software that's no longer on the market, so if those servers break, and they're 20 years old, there's no working alternative in place. I've seen such servers break twice. Once we had to buy an identical server from eBay and ship it to London overnight to repair a broken machine. Another time I just happened to be at the end of a long line of failures, and I'm pretty sure I was responsible for at least 10 million in trading losses. To this day, I don't know how I wasn't sacked for that one. This was an old Solaris 8 server, and frankly, probably half the components weren't working properly, but I was still responsible for that screw-up. Fun fact, we found some servers everyone forgot about. Some old OpenBSD 3 server, that's an OS from the frickin' 90s, after selling our business unit. The new owners just asked what the frick is that thing. We had old Red Hat 2 servers still running around when I left that bank a few years ago. We had IBM Power 4 servers around as well. Needless to say, nobody has released any security updates on those servers in over a decade. Second thing, security? What's that? This is mobile banking. We need no security. I've seen, quote, engineers commit confidential code for mobile banking apps with secret keys to public Git repos. Also, at one point, I was aware of critical security vulnerabilities in 2 mobile banking apps. This was about 2 years ago. Types of vulnerabilities that potentially would allow hackers to get all info, including card data. Which brings me to the third point. Pervasive culture of hiding everything. We had a security breach? Well, do the regulators know this? No? Then let's keep it that way. Nobody needs to know that we've been hacked and millions of people are about to see their money stolen. They hunt down whistleblowers who report this kind of thing. One bank I work at got fined for money laundering, established office in some Eastern European country and hired a bunch of young, fresh, recent graduates desperate for jobs and gave them documents to analyze, in language none of them spoke. They literally went out of their way to find students who couldn't understand the documents they were analyzing, and this was my first job. You know what happened when I actually found money laundering? The company would be gone from the system. Private companies, especially small ones, are the worst, probably because they can't afford armies of engineers to try and fix their problems. It's remarkably easy to hack some web store, get credit card data, and start selling it on the dark web. You can literally buy someone else's credit card for a few bucks. Banks at least have some security in place. My school's ID system was alphabetical and passwords followed numerical. So Adam Ames was Adam Ames 0001 password. We had access to everyone, and everyone had all their stuff on cloud servers, so we could edit anyone at any time. While I didn't do anything, I had friends delete everyone they hated's homework folders and stuff. Eventually, 30 kids were passed because the school didn't want to admit its security system was that easy to beat. But another 20 kids were due to fail. The school changed grades themselves so the graduation rate was higher. And we were able to see it happen live, so we had 2 major issues. Back when DSL was king and you could snoop your internal ISP network for file shares, I did just that. This was in the IRC days, so I always went looking down the same folder path to find whatever was open. This isn't really hacking in the sense of figuring out how something works and then working around it or defeating a security flaw. You could literally just input an IP range, and it would go around to every IP asking, "Hey, are you sharing?" I'd found some good adult movies, some real weird music, and rarely I'd find like a TV show or a movie. Fast DSL was still maybe 10M at the time, so compared to now it was really slow. After finding one of these accounts, I started opening the JPEGs inside. Things were looking good until I ran across obvious illegal adult films of the sort described earlier. I was sick, like I had to go throw up. I thought about what I can do about this. I could report it to my ISP security department, but then I'd be narking on myself. So that's obviously out. Could just delete it, but then they'd just download it again. So I took one of the images, renamed it to logo.sys, and placed it in the main root of the offender's C drive. To explain further for those that don't know, Windows 95 all the way up to Windows XP kept the loading Windows splash screen in a file called logo.sys. This made it easy for partners like HP, Dell, Compaq, and the others to make custom loading screens like Powered by HP along with the Windows logo. So it meant that now, the next time that computer rebooted, instead of a Windows loading screen, it would display the offending image that I'd renamed. I hacked into my own phone and went to Google symptoms of short-term memory loss, and all the links were already purple. What was the most horrible city that you've ever been to, and why was it so bad? This was written in 2012. Karachi, Pakistan. I saw malnourished children wandering a field of garbage, eating whatever was edible from the multi-acre pile of waste. I saw all manner of crippled children, teenagers, adults, and the elderly begging for the equivalent of 20 cents on the streets to stay away from starvation. More than one cried when I gave them money. I heard of my aunt's friend whose life savings were stolen from her as she walked out of the bank. She was making a deposit on a flat. She was robbed at weapon point and then chased the thieves for a mile down busy streets, screaming and crying for someone to help her as people made room for them to pass. My cousin worked there as a reporter for a brief period and did an article on the Hijra. They were essentially trans or eunuchs who begged and extorted money, basically to get them to stop hounding you. There was a man who was kidnapped by them, locked in a basement to a chair for 3 days and repeatedly beaten with a board with nails in it. He was given a choice, to have his manhood cut off and become a hijra himself, or be killed there in the chair. He eventually befriended one who allowed him breaks without supervision, and he escaped through a window. He then ran to the nearest rickshaw driver, got him to drive away, and then broke down and told him his story. The driver then gave him a free ride to the hospital. I saw a basic lack of any city planning. Highways interlaced neighborhoods, so the only way to get to your house from a bus stop was to jaywalk across a road with a speed limit of 65 kilometers per hour. I had to engage in this myself a few times when visiting relatives. I saw an unrivaled level of pollution and littering. During rush hour, the streets downtown had a visibility of 20 to 30 feet. The streets stank of smog and burned your eyes. The streets themselves were littered with all manner of plastics, human filth, and miscellaneous detritus. People didn't seem to use garbage cans. It was commonplace to throw garbage on the streets. There was also no visible form of garbage disposal. Garbage was just piled at street corners and burned. Ugh, that stench. I will never forget that smell. I could go on for a while. I stayed there for a period of 2 months while I was 13. My parents were with me in the first 2 weeks, but had to go back to their real lives. I elected to stay with relatives that I'd never met before and really soak up the culture. It was a blast, but I'll never go back to that terrifying city. I almost died a couple of times, and to go back now I would much more likely die. For those that want to see what Karachi is like, Vice did a story on it. The most interesting is part 5, where they interview an accomplished hitman. Well, at least this first story starts off strong on our expected theme. I'll say that there is a really interesting mix of first and third world countries coming up, and the way people seem to have interpreted their worst city is quite broad, so stay tuned. Raxaul, Bihar in northeast India. Been there for more than a month working in a hospital. Electricity for around 6 hours a day, rivers are black and contain more plastic than water, and you weren't allowed to visit anything on your own, including the surrounding villages, because they'd kidnap or rob you with homemade firearms. Almost everyone lived in filth. Involuntary electrocutions coming into the hospital every day because people would just try to steal electricity with live wires hanging around everywhere. Every rain would flood the streets and the filth would come out of the rivers because there were no sewers. Nice people though, except those that would threaten to kill our midwives or doctors because they claimed that their wife gave birth to a son, not a daughter, which happened several times in 5 weeks. You go over the border to Nepal, just 1 mile away, and voila, paradise. Not compared to many other places, but definitely compared to Raxaul. In Nepal, I really learned to appreciate concrete streets, cars, nice shops, even though they sold only replicas, of course, and garbage disposal. Back to Raxaul. Extremely corrupt government and clerks in general in that state. The Indians we talked to on our flight, who were very friendly and communicative like almost all Indians, although they really seemed to like fibbing without bad intent. They asked us where we were headed and we told them Bihar. They were shocked and tried to convince us otherwise. We did see some of Nepal and northern India after our visit to Raxaul, and it indeed was generally much more pleasant, although experiencing something like this, even for just a month, really changes your perspective on humans and what matters in life in general. Oh, and the villages around Raxaul looked like something straight out of a Help Starving Children commercial. 20 clay and straw huts, some oxen, some paths, some rice fields, children in various states of undress everywhere. The hospital staff sent out 3 or 4 doctors and nurses on tour each week to try and teach their children basic reading and math. Most of the inhabitants, certainly all the women, had never in their life been as far away from their villages as Raxaul, which is around 5 to 10 miles away. In some villages, the girls were supposedly married at 14 and had to stay in their clay hut until they gave birth to their firstborn, although that's just what the veterans there told me. They didn't speak English, and my Hindi was rudimentary, so I couldn't even ask them. Also, something I just remembered and need to get out. Right when we were there, the hospital had some sort of special sterilization month. It was just 300 rupees for women, men would never do that there, and 50 if they could prove that they were too poor to pay the 300. In 2005, 50 rupees were less worth than $1 or euro. Interesting fact, the surgeons usually sewed the skin layer with sterilized fishing lines because they were so much cheaper than surgical-grade sewing material. Don't blame them, the more people they can treat, the better. Pattaya, Thailand. Most Westerners here are greasy, overweight brothel tourists. It's full of poor women from the north who come there out of desperation to get involved with the trade. It tries to maintain an aura of glamour and allure, but everything about it is tawdry. Pattaya is honestly the worst beach city you can go to. It's filled with fat, randy Russian men trying to do the deed with an oriental girl. Ugh. but I can assure you that the rest of Thailand isn't that bad, and there are some amazing beach towns and cities out there. Basildon, Essex in the UK. The one time I went there, I was offered certain acts by what looked like a drunk, malnourished teenager before I'd even left the multi-story car park. When I told her to get lost, she reassured me that it was okay, she had rubbers. The town is little more than an endless parade of inbreds and drunken teenage mums in tracksuits. Screw everything about that place. It's definitely Camden, New Jersey for me. I've been to some crappy places around the world, including Palestinian areas where you really weren't supposed to be there, and legitimately crappy parts of Philly. Not from the, I'm from a quiet suburb and the Temple area is scary to me. I mean the actual north of Philly. I've never felt as uncomfortable in an immediate, self-preserving sort of way as I was in Camden. It's a perfectly fine city if you just take the speed line over to certain places. A few of the destinations are innocuous, like the aquarium, the Tweeter Center, a few things like that. But certain areas, man. I once got lost driving around Camden. It was the middle of the afternoon, in the middle of the week, 1 p.m. on a Tuesday if I recall correctly, and there were people loitering on either side of a large street. As I stopped at a light, they just casually started shambling towards my car. I mean, not trying to sneak up out of my line of sight or even sprint forward to catch me off guard. This was a decent-sized group of people, a handful from either side, just casually stumbling towards my car. It was like a zombie movie. I felt like I was in a scary movie. I ended up running the red light before they reached me. I'm a big dude and I've been mugged at weapon point more than once. I'm not a squeamish guy. But at that moment, I was really like, I'm not ready for this city. Psychologically, this is something I ain't ready to swallow. I was living in Philly and I decided I was tired of paying rent. I looked online and saw a house in Camden for $5,000. So I drove my car down there to check it out. I look at the place and realize it's worse than a dump right off the bat. The siding was all ripped off and the neighborhood was burnt out. But when I got out of the car, I looked up at the attic windows and a guy was just looking at me. We make eye contact and he disappears from the window like a ghost. I got the heck out of there. I've been all around Camden in my urban exploration phase though, and never got robbed. I was probably just lucky. Camden, New Jersey. The city is littered with working girls, substance use, and abandoned buildings. It's pretty sad, really. Camden used to be a thriving city. People from Philadelphia would go to Camden for its shops and nightlife. It was the birthplace of many industries, including RCA and Campbell. Since the 1950s, the population has plummeted more than 40% from 120,000 to the current level of around 70,000. And 40% of the 70,000 are currently unemployed. The story of the downfall is an interesting read, and if you guys have any time, I encourage you to check it out. Camden. It's like Gotham without Batman. You know, I kind of figured that certain cities would be making repeat appearances in this video, but my money was nowhere near it being Camden, New Jersey, and it being mentioned twice sequentially is ridiculous. Although I'm limited in my travels, my money would have been on Birmingham being the first reprising city from a first world country. Sorry, Brummies. Mogadishu, Somalia. I'm currently living and working in Mogadishu as a humanitarian worker. When I first saw this question, I thought, well, that's an easy answer, but thought it'd be kinda cheating to suggest it. That being said, I don't know what to write that would be at all surprising to anyone. Main reasons to be listed as #1 worst city would be the city being in complete ruins, most neighborhoods being controlled by militia, assassinations and indiscriminate killings being commonplace, multiple IED attacks a week, rampant police and military corruption, kidnappings of foreigners, Sharia law, mutilation of private parts, and a few other things. Overall, good times. Nikel, Russia. Murmansk is close second, though. With a little bit of cleaning up on the sides of buildings, I think that Murmansk could actually look quite nice. Isn't Nikel the place that has so much pollution that they want to start mining the soil for minerals that came down from the pollution? You know, sometimes I hate my town, and then I see comments like that make me so freaking glad I don't live anywhere else. Port-au-Prince, Haiti is pretty terrible, and I went there before the earthquake. Urine running through the streets, burning piles of trash, kids no more than 3 begging you for food. Not a pleasant experience. Most people I met in Haiti were quite nice though, so that makes up for it a little. The Haitians are great, but Port-au-Prince is the worst place I've ever been, and I've traveled quite a bit. I know there are worse places in the world, but if you're in the UK, don't go to Croydon. I wonder how many folk are just stating their hometowns. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. To you honor, let me dip my paintbrush in raw feces and paint you a picture. It's actually difficult to determine where the city ends and the dump begins. Hint, the dump has burned horse carcasses. There's dust and trash everywhere. People's houses are made out of scavenged garbage. Most of the buildings look like the builders got fired halfway through the job. There's so much dust that even the sky has a crappy brownish hue. On every barbed wire fence, there must have been thousands of raggedy plastic shopping bags just flapping in the wind. Blackpool, England. Whilst driving through, I got my windshield smashed by a 10-year-old hoodie. Djibouti. Worst city in Africa, 15 miles from the Somali border, and it smells like crap. The only thing there is a massive army base and a fueling stop for naval vessels. Stockton, California. Just depressing. I freaking knew this would be here. Gateshead. It's like a city from Fallout. Basically, me and my parents were curious and in Newcastle, so we took the metro across the Type to Gateshead, and we were not very impressed. Leaving a friend's dormitory in Camden and waiting for the bus, I was approached by 2 police cars. They demanded I get in the back of their car and they'd escort me to a neighboring town where I could take another bus home. That night, someone was murdered a few feet from where I was waiting. As someone who's lived 5 minutes from Camden my whole life, I can say this is 100% accurate. I was driving through Camden once, I can't remember why, and I was pulled over by the cops so that they could tell me to drive out of there as fast as possible and that they'd escort me. I drive a 95 Jeep Wrangler. Imagine someone in a Mercedes. Pallet Town. Nothing to do there, and my neighbor is a jerk. I don't know, I got a free Bulbasaur from there. I thought it was alright. Holy crap, Detroit, Michigan, are you kidding me? That place all around just reeks of broken dreams and heartbreak. Yeah, I've been in worse cities in Michigan. I've driven and walked around a lot of Detroit, but I'm more scared of Flint or Saginaw, the city itself, than anywhere in Detroit. I've been shot at in Flint and Saginaw multiple times. Detroit, I feel safer. But overall, there were like small 40-person towns in Jamaica that I drove through on my way from the airport to Negril. I can't help but feel like crying when I look back on it that these people literally had nothing but a metal container, like a shipping crate to call a home. And if a hurricane took that away, they'd all die young. God damn it. I clicked on this thread and kept thinking, don't be Detroit, don't be Detroit, don't be Detroit, as it loaded. Detroit is not that bad. I feel like people who don't live in the metro Detroit have a good understanding of it. It's not the best city by any means, but there's no way it's the worst city worldwide. Bakersfield, the armpit of California. My visit consisted of getting lost and seeing an undressed man passed out at 2 in the afternoon, numerous working girls, the creepiest bars I've ever seen, and a dead dog lying on the side of the freeway. Good times. Mogadishu, Somalia. Between 2006 and 2007, you had the Islamic Courts Union fighting the transitional federal government, led by the self-proclaimed President Yusuf Ahmed. They were fighting close combat in the city blocks in the south, while Ethiopian army rained artillery fire from the west. Also, US Navy gunships were giving air support to them, taking out entire buildings. Complete chaos in the streets, no one really knew who was fighting who, dead bodies everywhere. By far one of the worst moments in my life. Our houses had a giant stone wall around them, and my father and uncles were guarding it with AKs and 9mm, yelling to everyone who approached, "Who the frick are you? If we don't know you, we'll shoot you." And they only let in people they knew and women and children. I was 16 and they gave me a gat and told me to get inside and unloaded anyone who wasn't escorted by them. They said I and 5 other cousins were the last line of defense for the 35 women and children inside. Lucky for me, we all survived and I didn't have to demonstrate my sweet Call of Duty skills. There was a small arms exchange between my father and a few lost soldiers. I'm not sure who they belonged to, but luckily nobody was hit. Also, the south side of the wall was hit by artillery, leaving a 4-meter gap and taking down a part of the roof in the back rooms. Don't get me wrong, it was already a crappy city, but the end of 2006 got it really messed up. I was born of 1989 in Mogadishu and lived there until I was 9. The Civil War started in 1989 and had been going on ever since, with some moments of relative peace. So when I visited in 2006, tensions rose and all heck broke loose very fast. And there's our second city with multiple appearances. I don't think you get a prize for that honor though. And I will say it's probably a little unfair to claim a place as the worst city during the literal bombardment and civil war in such a place, although Mogadishu by a lot of accounts is still a bit harrowing, to put it lightly. Fresno, California. Runner-up, Blackpool, UK. Blackpool's truly terrifying, innit? Not only is it crap in itself, but the people there seem to have got stuck at some point halfway through evolution. Paris, France. Screw that city. I had some time to spare while waiting for my train to Madrid in Paris, decided to go to the Eiffel Tower, took the classic pics and stuff, grabbed a cab back to the train station, and the cabbie did the following. Took a pee in the street, got into a fight with a fellow driver that cut him, insulted some people in turbans that were selling stuff, got into another fight, took me to the wrong place and got mad with me when I showed him a picture of where I wanted to go, got pulled over by the cops for apparently doing business in an illegal way, the cops interviewed me, and finally took me to the station. Parisians are, well, interesting. Delhi, India. I've lived in LA most of my life and was totally unprepared for the amount of pollution in Delhi. I was there for 10 days, and visibility at best was about 2 miles, after which everything disappears into the brown mist. People litter everywhere and don't think twice about it. I was dumbfounded to see empty trash cans surrounded by trash. It's not the kind of city a foreigner can blend in, and you're constantly hounded by beggars, and almost everyone tries charging you 3 to 20 times the normal rate. Cutting in line is the norm. You can literally be speaking with a cashier and someone will squeeze their head between your face and the hole in the window through which you were speaking to the cashier without a second thought. Traveling in cars there is torturous. The worst traffic I've ever seen. People signal only with their horn. Making a left, honk your horn. Going through an intersection, honk your horn. Someone in the way, honk. You're surrounded by hundreds of cars, mostly rickshaws, all of which are just constantly honking. People drive both ways on both sides of the roads, which is scary as heck. The smell. Nothing ever seems to be finished there, and when it is, all the refuse and leftover material is right next to the site. The police and military, I'm not sure which, all have automatic weapons and they will also extort you for whatever they can. Open sewage troughs, sickening disparity of wealth living side by side, opulent, luxurious hotels butting up against shanties, with guards and walls surrounding the hotels. Crowded, long lines, no beef, street food looks delicious but will make you viciously sick. Did I miss anything? I enjoyed my visit though, granted me perspective that I didn't have before. I felt the exact same way about Delhi and India in general. I think the worst part was not being mentally prepared for the sickening amount of poverty. Being constantly approached and blocked by beggars was depressing and exhausting. It's also hands down the smelliest place I've ever been to. I could still smell India on my clothes even after getting home and going through multiple washes. It was an amazing, eye-opening experience though. Cleveland. But I heard that it's not Detroit, so it has that going for it. West Dayton, Ohio. Cheapest down-under kisses in America. My brother is a Dayton cop, and I once asked him where in Dayton I should avoid, and he circled the entire map of Dayton. Manila, the Philippines. I've been to many countries, but between the world's crappiest airport, the traffic, the con artists everywhere, the humidity, and just the lack of beauty in the city, this one ranks up there. Corpus Christi, Texas is where dreams go to die. It smells a lot, it rains a lot, and there's nothing to do except huff paint. I raise you Kingsville, Texas. That was so bad we went to Corpus to have fun. I lived in Rough and Ready, California for a while. They separated from the Union during the Civil War. The town was mostly trailer parks, and about once monthly a trailer would blow up due to a crystal lab going wrong inside. Paris, France. Sure, the sightseeing is nice, but everything else is horrible. The whole place stinks like pee and sewers, food and drinks are ridiculously overpriced, there are muggers and salesmen who force you to give them your money after strapping an elastic band on your hand. Not a fan of the urban culture at all. It's a beautiful city ruined by its own inhabitants. I remember just giving up and not eating while I was in Paris. I starved because I was sad and couldn't order food properly without teeing people off. Waiters refused to take my money and serve me because I mispronounced something, and grocery store clerks glared at me. I've never had a more difficult time exchanging money for food than when I was in Paris. When I did eat food and drink wine, it was not impressive at all. I was starving so badly that I promptly left and traveled to other cities in the world that impressed me much more. Detroit, Michigan, Gary, Indiana, and Cleveland, Ohio make up a triangle-shaped belt buckle on the Rust Belt. Toledo, Ohio is like a little crap turd stud in the center. Bucharest is the saddest city in Europe, I'm sure. It's full of stray dogs and seems to have an all-around bleak feeling to it. Riverside, California. A little desert town with nothing to do, no future, and average temps of 100+ degrees. And so much pollution, it's like breathing in glass. Though I've been convinced that it's really a conspiracy to make global warming worse in order to make the town a beachfront property. Is it cheating to name an entire country? Because I once took a trip to the Dominican Republic. It was frickin' miserable. From the airport to the resort, I saw nothing but misery and poverty. Third world nation. All along the streets were shacks and shanties, dead donkey in the middle of the roadway rotting away, working girls all over the place, and some of them were clearly minors. It was just depressing. The resort was nice, but whenever you left that false bubble of paradise, it was just so depressing. Screw all of you routing these US cities. True terror is witnessing a major city in any frickin' third world country. Miserable as heck. To be fair, the thread is what's the worst city you've been to, not the worst city in the world. Not a lot of people holiday in Karachi or Lagos, even though they're obviously far worse than Detroit or Gary, so they're not going to get mentioned as often. Chernobyl. Place is a dump. I thought it was a blast. Los Angeles, California. Superficial and fake. It's not about who you are or what you can do, but how many names you can drop in a conversation. Even the janitors brag about whose toilets they've cleaned. What's the biggest flex that your pet pulled on you to assert dominance? We have a specific plant in our garden, euphorbias for you garden nerds. Well, my dog just wouldn't stop doing his business on them. Them specifically. So I took some firewood planks and stuck them in the ground as a makeshift fence around them. It worked for a few days until she crawled past the gap between the plant and the hedge, did a reverse turn and crapped on my plant again. Persistence at its best. I have 5 cats. The youngest will wait until I clean every litter box in the house and throw the bag in the trash to decide that she wants to go number 2 in one box and then number 1 in another box. I wondered for a while if this is the only time she goes and she's just picky about having a clean box, but it's not. This happens literally every time I clean their boxes. She'll sit and watch me as I'm cleaning them too. One time when my Poochie managed to get 3 tennis balls in his mouth at the dog park. He hasn't been able to do it again since that one time, but he routinely walks around with 2 in his mouth and looks at the other dogs like, check me out. At the dog park years back, we were approaching a pond. There was this big dog in the water that looked horribly disfigured. Like it must have tried fetching a live M80 and had his mouth blown apart. Poor thing. Whatever, life goes on, he was happily playing with 2 other dogs in the water. As I got closer, trying to discreetly check out this messed up mouth, the motherfricker drops 3 frickin' tennis balls out of his mouth and suddenly goes back to being a normal, idiot, non-disfigured boxer dog, or similar breed. I don't even think that was his maximum capacity, to be honest. My rabbit when I went out of town for the weekend. I lined up someone to stay with her. I was just heading back to my house when I got the call to get home now because the rabbit was acting weird. Listless, turning down treats, all things that point to the beginnings of GI stasis, which is bad. I get home and sit with her for about 20 minutes. Yep, she's showing signs. I get her to the emergency vet. $300 later, and the vet tells me her diagnosis. Drama queen. The rabbit was just upset that I wasn't home. Every time my bun would get mad at me, he'd just pile all of his toys in his ceramic water bowl and push it to his cage door. Then he'd just angry stare at me like, that's it, I'm taking my roly toy and I'm leaving. I'd never thought that rabbits were particularly smart or distinct from one another, but lately I've met a few indoor bunnies and some of them are real little characters, by which I mean jerks. There were a couple of more chill ones though. One time, my bird was really mad about bedtime. She flew to the curtain, peeped loudly until I watched, and then pooped on the curtain while looking straight at me. She was poop-trained and definitely knew what she was doing. I'm always startled by how frickin' smart birds are. A friend of mine has an African grey. He's owned her for 20 years or so. He got married about 7 years ago, and the bird is well aware that the husband is the new guy. Half the time when he tells it to do something, like be quiet, the response he gets is a very salty, I'm not your bird. Then yells, Diane, because the husband has no street cred. Okay, so this is just a little gross, FYI. My golden retriever brought back a whole deer leg once. A whole leg, from hoof to hip. Saw him walking up from the field and I thought he had just a big stick until I saw the pink dangly bits. Absolutely no idea where he got it. I searched our entire 12-acre property and the adjoining neighbor's 20 acres. Didn't find anything. He was proud of it too. Didn't try to eat it or anything, just proudly brought it back to show me. It was like his new special stick and I'd throw it for him. My mum was horrified. Best part was, the dog's name was Buck. Yeah, my husky came back with a leg once too. We lived by the woods though. I just assumed she found it out there somewhere. She came back with many things. The most impressive was she was covered in porcupine quills, hobbling along. That was a trip to the 24-hour vet. But she had her head held high because she had in her mouth, by the neck, that porcupine. I went out in the woods with her the next week to find out where she got the thing. As the crow flies, 2 miles. But she probably took the trails like she always did, so she walked for at least 2 miles with quills all in her side, back, mouth, and both front legs. With that frickin' porcupine. One of my dogs used the other dog as a stepping stool to climb up on the couch. Straight up walked up the one laying next to the couch to get up there. Just blatant disrespect. My friend and at the time roommate's dog got out and ran into the highway. Got hit by a car going 50 to 55 miles per hour. The driver took him to the vet. We got the call and went to get him to go find out he had an itty-bitty scratch on his knee. And that's about it. He literally took a hit by a car, was sent flying, and walked away from it with no injuries. Rhodesian Ridgebacks are tough as nails. My dog hardly ever barks and is very well behaved. When we go for walks, every dog we walk past in my neighborhood barks ferociously at him, and he pees in their yards, and only in their yards. Every time I'm cleaning up dog doo, my dog will squat down right next to me and drop a giant steaming load of more. She poops probably 5 times a day as well. She does it to be a jerk. My significant other's dog turns over her food bowl every single time she's left by herself. She'll even do it when she knows you're leaving but haven't left just yet. I bought my 10-pound dog this gigantic plush bed to put on my side of the bed because I'm tired of sleeping with them. I figured I'd have to babygate them there for the first few nights, but no big deal. The first night it went okay, a little whining, quickly settled down and went to sleep. The second night, my girl dog, who I've had since she was a puppy, decided she was not going to stand for this inhumane mistreatment and literally stood on her back feet and screamed. I've never heard a dog make the frickin' noise this banshee was making. I thought she was dying. I moved the baby gate to get to her, and she stopped screaming and hopped up on my bed and curled up like she usually does, like nothing was wrong in the first place. I can hear that scream. It's the same scream I hear from my dog when I spray his paws when he's done something bad. He's a big baby and he acts like they've just been dipped in battery acid. When we got guinea pigs, we thought we might have hurt one because she screamed bloody murder when we picked her up. The next time we realized she was just a big baby when she screamed just as bad before any of our hands had actually touched her. I have a pot-bellied pig named Luau. I was outside on my patio working on a craft project while I let him run around the yard. He kept coming up and bumping against the table to see if I had a treat or if I'd pet him, and he was messing me up, so I put a spray bottle of water next to me. He knows it and doesn't like getting sprayed, so he'll stay away and exercise instead of bothering me. I went inside for a minute, came back out, and the spray bottle was on its way to the other side of the yard, and Luau had climbed into my seat and was sitting there happily wagging his little pig tail. I have a blue heeler. I was moving to Germany and selling things on Let Go. She didn't like the idea of people taking our stuff, so she started getting aggressive. So when I saw it starting to happen, when the next customer arrived, she got put in a bedroom. The next time that customer came, she grabbed a stuffed animal and put it in her mouth as if to say, "I will not act like I will bite someone," and then carried the animal around in her mouth the entire time the people were there. The kids petted her. Everyone thought she was so cute. For the next 2 weeks as I sold stuff, when people came over, she had a stuffed animal in her mouth. Healers are so smart, it's kind of crazy. This is definitely my fault because I've encouraged it, but it's still funny. Every day I come home from work and I give my kids a hug or a pat on the head or some show of affection. The dog will whine and follow me around the house until I drop to both knees on the floor and give him a hug as well. I put my pet mouse in a tall wooden box without a lid because I thought he couldn't climb that high. He pooped in the box and covered his paws in it, which I think provided him with the friction required to climb. He made it to the top and I had to put him back into the box, but it was quite impressive. I had a foster dog once, and while we weren't home, she somehow scooted her crate all the way into the living room and managed to stick her entire head through the bars to chew through one of the important cords on our TV, so we were left without sound for like 2 months. I like that the pet in no way benefited from this, and likely didn't foresee any tangible reward from doing so in the first place. This is just an FU for leaving the pooch in the crate. Nice. I showed my new hamster to my best friend and he started pulling his own crap out of his butt with his teeth and threw it at us. The hamster, not the friend. Oh boy, it's so good to see a hamster comment. These little jerks can do unbelievable things. They're strange little furballs who hate human contact and sleep through the day just to keep you up all night because they run their squeaky hamster wheel for hours. They make the perfect pet. My sand boa, who was at the time thinner than my pinky finger, wrapped himself around my wrist the tightest he could and attempted to eat me. I pulled him off, pat his head, and put him back in his enclosure. Nice try, bud. My cat likes to wake me up every morning at 4 a.m., meowing loudly and knocking off whatever he can from my countertop. I decided to put him in my very large bathroom with food, water, toys, bed, and litter box. He then proceeded to take the fattest cat crap I've ever seen in my life in my sink. My kitty caught a centipede. It was an awful experience. It was pretty big and I'm guessing crawled up the bathtub drain, as that's where I found the cat after she was crying in there. She's pretty quiet, so I try to answer when she's meowing. I saw the bug and said, "Oh, nice job," as she pawed it around, and promptly decided to get the frick out as I hate bugs. That's why I got a cat, you see? She'll deal with the bugs, right? Nope, not good enough. She starts crying as soon as I turned around. She wanted me to watch her eat the bug. I was still so grossed out. Anytime I turned away, she'd cry, make sure we had eye contact, and take a bite out of the centipede. She was just a kitten, so it was an alarming combo of adorable and gross. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had these 3 fiddler crabs in a 20-gallon tank, 1 boy and 2 girls. After 3 happy months together, I was watching them hang out, and the boy grabs one of the girls and rips her arm off. He then grabs her by the other arm and picks her up, then smashes her against the ground repeatedly until I caught him with a net. She died, and the other girl lived in constant fear until he himself died of natural causes. Crabs do not give a single frick. My ex had hermit crabs, and there were a few incidents where he found crab pieces and had no idea who killed who. They'll drag a crab out of the shell and kill them if they want to use the shell instead. We knew certain ones had names, but we based that on what shell they had. We also had one dubbed the Senator, as if another crab made the water all gross immediately after we replaced it, they'd get up to the tallest point and wave back and forth until one of us went over. It was nice of them to look out for the others. I have a bell hanging on my front door that my dogs ring when I need to take them out. My husky started ringing it, and when I got dressed and put my shoes on, she'd go lay in my spot on the bed and not get out. Once I called her bluff and didn't get up from the bed, so she crapped on my floor. Absolute power move. We had a kitty with extra toes. He'd pick things up and leave them in my shoes as gifts. Usually hair ties, a toy mouse, or sometimes paper. At a party, he picked up a $20 bill out of a friend's pocket sitting on the floor. Then in front of everyone, walked around and stuck it in my shoe across the room. He was a good kitty. No one would have ever believed me if they didn't see it happen. It was hilarious. Cleaning the kitty litter, I was carrying it back to the spot. She jumped into the tray while I was carrying it and just went number 2. I had to stay still until she finished, and she didn't even cover it. My cat used to cover until one day he caught me cleaning his box, and since then he hasn't even bothered. He knows I'll cover it for him if he doesn't, because I don't want flies or the smell. He played me so hard and now I'm stuck being his servant. My family were talking about how the cat stopped bringing mice in the house, and the next day he brought a rat in. When my dog, a male corgi, was little, we were on a walk with 2 female corgis. He tried to be all alpha and pee with his leg up, but he lost his balance. So instead, he continued by holding his front paw up like, "Ladies, try not to get excited." My neighbor was talking about getting a second dog. So my dog got out one night and effed her dog. Now my neighbor has 8 new dogs. I have a 95-pound weem that's just made of steel. When he stands, he's taller than I am. He doesn't have an ounce of fat on his body, just bands of muscle wrapped around his chest and legs. I also have a temperamental 12-pound cat that he is terrified of. The dog occasionally tries to work up the nerve to give the cat a friendly boop. She turns around and lets him lick her butt instead. He ducks his head and complies until she's had her fill, like a good little slave boy, and then she swats his face and runs him off. I once farted in the living room, so Buster decided to diarrhea all over the rug. Jumped from the highest point of the cat tree, which is about 8 feet high, halfway across the kitchen, all for a fly in mid-air. The poor cat misses it entirely, falls to the kitchen table, hits his midsection on the edge of the table, bounces backwards against the chair, and finally lands on his feet on the floor. He shakes it off and continues chasing the fly like nothing ever happened. He did end up eventually catching that damn fly. My cat will just flop over and stare at me before I go to work. I know this sounds crazy, but I swear she knows exactly what she's doing. Well, human, isn't it about time you went and did that thing you do so you can buy me food and poop sand? Well, hop to it then. Maybe if you do a better job of it, you can buy me something better too. We all know that's what a cat would say if they understood the concept of a job. And it sounds like this one might do. She tried to jump the distance of my swimming pool, but she fell in it. She hates water. My Great Dane picks up a small sapling and expects me to play fetch with it. One of our dogs isn't that big, 60 pounds, but we full-on had to train her not to try to bring trees home instead of sticks. Eventually it got to the point where we just said, "That's a tree," and she'd leave off, but there was a good chunk of time that if she could get her jaw around it, it was coming home. Every time I feed my beagle some meat, he always comes up to me and shoves his mouth next to my nose to let me know he just ate some good stuff. The little jerk swats my paintings or posters off the wall every morning and then runs away and flops over like, "Who, me?" when I get out of bed to make him stop. My dog hates other dogs, and especially the neighbor's happy, fluffy husky, so she keeps barking at the husky, "Frick you, I'm better than you, stop getting my family's attention, rah rah rah." And my dog then showed off her new toy to the husky. Neighbor dog broke the toy, and my dog lost her ever-loving mind. I thought my dog couldn't jump onto the bed because of how small he is, so one day I was eating some food on my bed and he jumped up and ate my food. My dad called our cat a lazy, useless son of a bee. The cat dropped into the pasture, caught a mouse and dropped it at my dad's foot all in the space of 5 minutes. The mouse was still alive and I swear the cat made sure to stare down my dad before he ate it. When I was a kid, I had a basset hound named Fred. Best dog ever. I also had a cat named Patches. Patches was a bit of a troublemaker. She'd sit on the kitchen table and swat at the dog while we weren't looking, and would pester him into barking and chasing her across the house, so then we'd yell at the dog and she'd just prance by as if she wasn't at all responsible. That poor dog. He was the best and that cat just pestered the crap out of him. We got these hard, circular treats that looked kind of like a burger patty for my dog Snoopy one day. He was so excited to try a new treat that he tried to bite it weirdly, like crunch it in one big bite, and it ended up just jamming his mouth fully open. He was freaking out because he couldn't close his mouth and was running all over the house, but wouldn't let any of us help him. Eventually, he got tired and let us help him break it, but he seemed more careful around those treats after that. I have a Mastiff, and he does this defibrillator punch thing to my family jewels every time I get home. I just started my fat cats on a diet, and believe me, the drama is strong. My dog used to hunt and drag back deer, mostly fawns, but sometimes you'd see him come back with a full-on doe. One winter, he dragged a fawn into our under-house area and turned it into a meat locker. He'd run around the house and disappear for hours until we realized he was chomping on his deer-flavored meatsicle. We lived in the mountains with gravel roads, few neighbors, and a free-roaming dog at the time. Every time someone enters the house, my dog runs to get a big bone he has and parades walking like a horse and holding it high. My rabbit once attempted to play soccer with us. Keyword here, attempted. My dog will push things out of my hand if he feels like he isn't being given enough attention. Had a few friends over recently since I just got my old SNES set up and someone had to pet him at all times while we played, or else he'd try to sit on our hands. He isn't aggressive about it at all, that would be a different story, he just tries to sit on our hands. My kitten thought he could take out the vacuum cleaner after hiding from it. He got his tail sucked up. Not a power head roller, don't worry, he's fine, it was just in the tube. And now whenever I vacuum, he decides on top of the kitchen cabinets is where he'd like to be. I have a 35-pound mutt who is very, very good at hunting. So much so that we don't let her off the leash save in our backyard and in fenced-in dog parks because she's a menace to wildlife. So she's on her 6-foot leash and we're hiking like we do most days at a local trail. She suddenly darts off to the left and into the underbrush and then emerges with a groundhog. She shakes it once and it's dead. If you've never dealt with a groundhog, they are nasty motherfrickers. Well, okay then. I guess even on a 6-foot leash, you're still a menace to society. Dog came into me and my significant other's room while we were partaking in activities and watched for a second and then left. 1 minute later, he came back in with his favorite stuffed animal toy and started making boisterous, enthusiastic whoopee with it right there. Damn dog tried to show me up. I'd just finished cleaning the poop in the back and tossing it out. I go out to my backyard and my dog comes out, looks at me, and goes number 2 again. I even tried getting her to go before I went to do it. We had a gathering yesterday and my sister-in-law brought her 5-month-old baby. My dog came up to her to investigate her toys. The baby was playing with a pink octopus plushie and she pulled the toy away from him. He went upstairs to his toy basket by his bed and brought out his blue monster, came back downstairs and made the rounds everywhere, showing every family member his monster. Finally came up to the baby and put it in her face. As soon as she went to grab it, he pulled it out of her hands and walked around for another 10 minutes carrying it. We all died laughing. They're so cute together, we just have no idea what was going through his mind at the time. I saw my 2 dogs herd a vole under a tree. After they had it cornered, the first dog feigned an attack and scared the vole into the mouth of my second dog. When did you get an injury so dumb it nearly earned you a Darwin Award? I once injured my leg by jumping off the back of a moving truck so that I wouldn't be in trouble for riding on the back of a moving truck. There's a tool called a hay hook. It looks like a big capsin hook hand, except it's welded to a metal bar. You stab it into small bales of hay to make them easier to drag around. One day I missed the hay and hit my knee. I sneezed. It dislodged a herniated disc, causing me to collapse and rupturing my vertebrae, crippling me permanently. So yeah, I got crippled with a sneeze. Oh my god, that sucks. I was waiting to see a sneeze injury. I sneezed while driving a car and popped a rib and dislocated my jaw. I once broke my thumb trying to give someone a hug. Awkwardly caught it on their body and the ligament of my stretched thumb popped off and took some bone with it. When I was 5, I was stepped on by a llama. My mum said I had a llama foot-shaped bruise on my back for a couple of weeks. They closed the petting zoo after that. When it reopened, they no longer allowed people inside the animal pens. In January, I broke my rib trying to get a soda from the backseat of my car. I've hurt myself in many ways, so this was tough to figure out. A while ago, I was riding my bike and I saw a rabbit. I wasn't watching where I was going and rode off a retaining wall. I got a concussion from that. I snapped my humerus in half while arm wrestling. I did not find it as humorous as it sounds. When I was 6, my forehead was really itchy, but it was one of those deep itches that you couldn't really scratch out. So my bright 6-year-old brain told me to get to an all-fours position and try rubbing my forehead into the carpet. Well, I did that and ended up taking a small layer of skin off that took ages to heal completely. Imagine walking in on your child doing this. You'd think they were possessed. When I have kids, I'm already anticipating at least the first 8 years just being a bizarro horror show of insanity because of stuff like this, slowly giving way to the general frustration and resentment of their teen years. Good times. Hope you turn out okay by the time you hit 20, offspring. I broke my foot while practicing the finishing moves in Karate Kid. I was 20. I ended my brief interest in ballet by doing a grand jeet into a door and breaking my toe. I woke up, looked at the clock, had time before the alarm would go off and went back to sleep. Woke up again, looked at the clock, felt a pop and heard a sound in my neck. Torticollis. I had to call my dad to come to the college, help me down 3 flights of stairs and take me to the ER. It ruined my whole 2-week Christmas break. I turned my body in bed, left butt cheek cramped up and went out at an oblique angle, and I heard a pop. It was the day before my grandma died. 2 years of severe left lower back, hip, knee, and ankle pain. Trying to get treatment, but it's still stuck and popping and clicking. Luckily, not as painfully as before, though. My right shoulder and elbow are clicking because I did CPR twice in 2 days. Those were the only times I've had to do CPR, and just my luck it was back to back. Just insult on injury. In high school, as I was leaving, I saw a high jump, pad and bar on the field, so I decided to give it a try. When I landed on my back, my knee came down and I gave myself a black eye. Watching American football as a kid, my dad missed the play where one of the wide receivers injured his ankle. I tried to show him what had happened. Dad, he did this, and I ended up with the same injury. As a kid who'd just learned how to ride a cycle, I saw my auntie visiting us with a cake in her hand. I was so excited I rode hard and fast toward her and forgot to brake. I rode my bike into a wall and broke my hand. On a positive note, I got the biggest piece of cake. This wasn't me, but I was playing basketball with some friends one day, and the topic of Derrick Rose's ACL tear came up. A friend of mine was confused how he could have gotten hurt on that play, so he tried to mimic exactly what Rose did to see if he could feel any pressure in his knee. And he tore his meniscus. I tore my meniscus 6 weeks ago and had surgery to repair it. Everyone keeps asking me if I did that playing sports, and I have to tell them, no, I in fact injured it rolling over on the couch. I'm 20 if that makes it any more embarrassing. I punched myself in the forehead during an improv comedy bit and gave myself a concussion. My sister said, "Hey, I want to shoot your BB pistol." So I gave it 10 pumps, handed it to her, walked over to the tire as I'm setting up the pop can on the tire, and she shoots me in the butt. Took a doctor 10 minutes to dig it out. Same, except mine was my little brother and it was right above my crack. He apologized until he was well into his 20s, and last year, I guess he got tired of the teasing, he just said, "You know what? Screw it. Yeah, I did it on purpose." That really hurt. I'd just lost about 30 pounds and my belt was getting too big. Most people would say, "Oh, time to buy a new belt." And the craftier among us might say, "Oh, time to get out the leather punch." I said, "Time to dig a hole in the belt with my folding pocket knife." You can see where this is going. I was using my left hand for some reason. It folded in on itself while I was digging a new hole in the leather, and I cut my thumb to the bone, and had to go to urgent care to get it stitched up. My wife bought me a leather punching tool for Christmas that year. Also, to the people asking me, "Why didn't you use a nail or drill or whatever?" Well, I guess if I was smart, I wouldn't have been posting this, would I? I decided it would be quicker to walk down an incline of tennis ball-sized rocks and flip-flops with my hands full than walk around on the pavement. I was right. I descended very quickly. Having your hands full decreases brain functioning because you can only think about the fastest way to stop having your hands full. You tried your best. I tried to break a thread by wrapping it around my fingers and suddenly pulling. A thread of Kevlar. It cut my fingers to the bone. Severed 3 tendons in my left hand while slicing a bagel. Basic tendon repair went over well, but my middle finger got infected. They had to put a tendon from my leg into my hand. 3 surgeries over a frickin' bagel. Everyone keeps asking me if I ate the bloody bagel, and no, I didn't. My horse kneed me on my temple by accident while I was kneeling down bandaging his leg. He knocked me out cold for just a few seconds, and I ended up with a very swollen black eye for about 10 days. He was actually just getting a better footing, not being difficult at all, and it was just a tap. But I looked like I'd been KO'd by Lennox Lewis in round 1. I have another one. A horse once bit me in the chest, I'm a woman, and he bit me hard. I had a fun time explaining my injury to my mum. I got a fun scar too. Busted lip. I punched myself in the mouth while ripping a wax strip off my leg. The stupidest time I merely just hurt myself? That was peeing on an electric cattle fence because I thought it would be funny. It was, just not for me. And the stupidest proper injury? Well, one time when I was a kid, I was running around the yard, pushing the wheelbarrow. I hit a big root, went flying forward into the wheelbarrow, and ended up crashing into a tree like 40 feet down a hill. Oh look, that last one is just so perfectly cartoonish. I'm going to be disappointed if you didn't scream, "Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo!" like Goofy on your way down. Unfortunately, I can't suspend my disbelief enough to believe that you magically sprung up uninjured like aforementioned clumsy dog. On vacation in Florida, I'd forgotten my sandals at home and didn't want to wear shoes down to the beach. Figured I'd buy a pair later and was already the last of our group to arrive. So I walked down barefoot. The boardwalk ended up being a lot longer than it looked due to a twist and was made out of some odd, almost plastic composite material instead of wood. I have a very high pain tolerance. When I finally reached sand, my feet went from mildly uncomfortable to on fire. I had to be carried back off the beach. 2nd-degree burns on the entirety of both soles on my feet. I couldn't walk for a week. I still openly tell people it's one of the dumbest things I've ever done. I woke up with a sprained ankle. I still have no clue what I did before I fell asleep or in my sleep, but suddenly I woke up, my ankle was swollen, and I couldn't walk. I broke my foot on the way to the kitchen to get a muffin. I ate the muffin, lying on the floor with my foot propped up on a chair, trying not to cry. Priorities. And to clarify, my foot was asleep and I stepped on the side of it hard. They were poppy seed muffins from a mix my grandma gave me for Christmas. I fell through drop ceiling, thinking that it wasn't drop ceiling. It did not hold my weight. In my defense, there was a thick layer of dust. However, I did fall 10 feet, land on a cement floor, my back hit first and then my head, so I went to the hospital, I got all kinds of scans, and I got out of there with no injuries aside from a fractured vertebrae that was somehow already there. Go figure. Ah, so that's why it's called a drop ceiling. Well, this is a very high bar for me. I think this time I'll go with the time that I broke my arm because I was running and my feet got tangled in my parachute pants. This was well before MC Hammer was famous. I was wearing a costume. Think Disney's version of Aladdin. Except this was before that as well. Be right back, suing Disney. I gave myself a blood nose taking the cap off a particularly stubborn marker. I tore a rotator cuff cleaning the bathtub. Guy with a farm down the road asked, "Hey, can you come by help bale hay tomorrow?" Me, at 16, with no prior baling experience. Sure, I'll be there. I showed up in basketball shorts. I left looking like I spent 3 minutes in a broom closet with 5 cats and a vacuum cleaner that I couldn't shut off. I should clarify, the farmer was a nice guy. He laughed when he saw me, told me what I was getting into, and asked if I wanted to change to jeans. I was only a couple of minutes down the road, so I could have quickly changed. But I was young and stubborn, and it was hot, so I said no. His son, around my age, was also there, in jeans, and proceeded to laugh at my misfortune. It was a good time, though. Great experience, and a little under-the-table cash was also a great incentive. I've also had cats and had the unfortunate experience of being next to one or holding one when my mum turned a vacuum cleaner on. And that is exactly how I looked on my legs. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Around 6 months ago, I was waiting for my sister on my college campus. Around the same time, I'd accidentally gotten grease on my disc brakes, so they weren't stopping correctly. I had the great idea to stand the bicycle on the handlebars and spin the wheel from the pedals as fast as they could go on the highest gear, and then pinch the disc brakes with my thumb and index finger. This worked for a while, and I got a lot of grease off until my thumb got caught in the disc brake, causing it to be partially amputated and fracture to the bone. I needed 6 stitches, painkillers, and around 4.5 months for the skin to completely heal. 0 out of 10 would not recommend trying. One time I somehow sliced my thumb to the point of bleeding with my other thumbnail. It wasn't even sharp. No frickin' idea how I did it, and I just sat there for a good 5 seconds staring in disbelief at my bleeding finger before getting a band-aid. Also burst a blood vessel in my eye by sneezing too hard. I looked like a Bond villain for a bit. On a September morning 2019, I woke up for school. It's a Friday, I think the 19th. My family jewels were aching a little, but nothing too bad. I get up and take a shower. While I'm taking the shower, the pain gets way worse. I get out and dry myself quickly and then have to gag because of the pain. My mum gets alerted and comes to help me. I tell her to tell Dad, she doesn't have a license, that I need to go to the ER. I get dressed and off we go. The roads are smooth, so I didn't have the problem of going over bumpy roads at least. In front of the ER, there's a lady on a computer. I go up to her and say, "It's my testes." And my dad says, "It's probably a kidney stone," because we have that in our family. I go into the room and do the ultrasound thing on my kidneys. The pain goes up from my left jewel to my left arm, and I think I felt the pain in my throat too. I was undressed at this point with 3 men in the room and my dad. My body is shaking, my ADHD brain is all over the place, the doctor's looking at my kidneys and has checked the right one, then it feels like he takes 20 minutes to look for the left kidney, until I say, "My stones hurt, not my kidney." And he changes to the tip of the ultrasound thing to one that is pointy. And this dude, this motherfricker, he just rams that thing into my equipment sack like he wants to kill me. At that moment, I just remember cold, slow pain going from my reproductive storage units to the rest of my body, and I black out. When I wake up, I hear this noise of someone banging on the wall. When I look down, it's my legs, which are now uncontrollably shaking very violently. Someone's holding my legs down, which makes everything worse. The guy is like, "Yep, you have testicular torsion," and then they gave me pain meds. I get operated, everything is nice, I look at the damage afterwards in the hospital bed, and my Johnson just looks absolutely swollen and huge. In short, my left nut turned 180 degrees while I was sleeping, and it didn't get any blood. It was frickin' bad, man. I thought I was going to die. I had to get my sports ball bag cut open to pull my offending appendage out and turn it back around the right way. Wintertime Friday, weekend of the Super Bowl. I was running around high school in untied Timberlands. Friend was chasing me. I tripped and fell into a hallway door and sliced my head open. I hit the door so hard my Pokemon Blue version flew out of my back pockets, along with everything else in my pants. When the janitors cleaned up the mess, they brought me back a purple cartridge. The fact that I had to go back through this to determine what your injury actually was really showcases where your priorities were at the time of the accident. Then again, if I'd had a Game Boy as a kid, it would have been my most precious possession as well. Not so much stupid as in my fault, but the universe was definitely laughing at me. I decided I was finally going to get serious about running. I wanted to run for exercise for a while, but I was out of shape and just embarrassed. I finally mustered up the courage to go to the gym. I walk outside to let my dog go to the bathroom before I leave, and a wasp stung me on the lower side of my foot right in the arch because I was wearing sandals. I even had my workout clothes on and everything. My foot was the size of a softball for a week. And for clarification, I wasn't going to wear sandals to the gym, I just had them on to let my dog out before planning to put on actual running shoes. The wasp, I guess, had other ideas. The stupidest bee sting I've gotten was when I was driving the boat across the lake to the landing. I hit a wasp with my neck. So of course I slapped my hand to my neck. I got stung again on the hand. I think I might just be a bee or wasp magnet with how often I've been stung. Thankfully, I don't swell or have any sort of allergic response. Today, I was trying to open a can of stain. The screwdriver slipped and I stabbed it right into my other hand. So now I'm staining stuff with a small stab injury in one hand. I threw out my back, sneezing too hard. I was so embarrassed by the actual reason that I told everyone I was helping my mum move furniture. I was trying to reposition a tube for a ride at Waterworld right before going down it. I slipped on the first step and sprained my ankle. By the time I got done with the ride, it looked like a baseball in place of my ankle. It was only my second ride of the day. It happened earlier today. Put a mini bike on its kickstand, walked 2 feet, turned around and found the bike falling on top of me. I could have sworn I almost severed a muscle strand in my calf where the frame hit me. 5 years later, and I still have a small divot in my leg. Oh boy, I pinched a nerve stapling paper at an awkward angle. I had to go to urgent care. It was considered an on-the-job injury too. I was so embarrassed. I cut my thumb open to the bone while taking apart a Rubik's Cube with a skinning knife. I hit my pinky toe on the leg of a table. Instead of it just hurting or whatever, my entire foot was bruised. Tore a muscle in my butt while bending over putting laundry in the dryer. Broke my finger when punching down bread dough. Strained a muscle in my back while pooping. Dislocated my shoulder walking a dog. Pulled a plate, from a fused bone, off the bone. Ran headfirst into a street sign, and many, many more. I sprained my wrist racing my sister in an indoor gym. We made the finish line about a foot from the wall, and I ran straight into the wall at full tilt. All the time I broke my toe because I was running barefoot in the house and tripped over a dumbbell that I'd left in the middle of the floor. The first one is a little dumber in and of itself, but the second one is compounded by the fact that I was a full-on adult when it happened, so I didn't have the excuse of being a dumb kid. 4th grade, excited for my first ever youth soccer practice that afternoon, I kicked the solid wood coffee table in excitement that morning, nearly breaking my big toe. I did not get to go to practice. You know, I have an unfortunate talent of accidentally cutting myself on strange objects. All of these were very minor and needed a band-aid at most. I have cut myself on a microwave, a jar of honey, a piece of frozen ham, a locker, twice, and a pool table. I cut the ever-living F out of my finger opening a gosh darn bag of salad. Took a golf ball to the face. We were launching it out of one of those giant water balloon launchers. I pulled back as far as I could and let go. The ball stayed in the pouch and snapped back into my face right below my right eye. We're talking maybe half an inch from losing my eye. My zygomatic bone took it all, but surprisingly nothing broke. I just sprayed a ton of blood and had a massive black eye that migrated all over my face. I was deaf in one ear for about a week because I'd built a super pop-pop cracker. I'd taken 2 boxes of those pop-pops, or those paper snappers, and very carefully unwrapped each one. I emptied the contents into a tissue paper and twisted the end to form a huge pop-pop. I then accidentally dropped this inside the house, right on the tiled floors at my feet, where it exploded and echoed so loudly. My left ear kept ringing, and then I was deaf for days. My sister, who was 3 floors above me, heard it as well. Scraping the gunpowder off a roll of paper caps and then hitting the rather explosive pile with a hammer had a similar effect on me. I was in my mid-30s at the time, and it was actually my older brother who had the idea, and also him that wielded the hammer. The resulting bang was a bit louder than either of us expected. I threw out my shoulder, angrily moving a hotel pillow in the middle of the night. I had to go to a personal trainer to get a full range of motion back. Whoops! I also broke a tooth boxing at a party. We said no headshots, but now I have a crown. I made a volcano cake for an event. It looked awesome. Red velvet interior surrounded by chocolate to give it that stratovolcano look, whipped cream pyroclastic flows, and red sugar drizzles that I hardened and placed upright in the crater so that it would look like a lava burst. I tripped going up the stairs. I saved the cake by landing on my elbows, but one of the sugar lava pieces went up my nostril and sliced it. I pulled a hamstring getting out of bed. Look, the amount of you who've absolutely paralyzed yourselves just getting on and off your mattresses, or for the matter of fact just lying there, is absolutely mind-boggling and scary. I'll now dread the necessary act of sleep. According to the ER doctor, I fooshed, or fell on outstretched hands. Stepped on a rock, ankle gave out, braced my fall with my arms and hands. And the damage? I dislocated both elbows, broke off radial boneheads at the elbow. I had surgery to put a plate and pins on the left side. Radial head replacement surgery on the right one. There was absolutely no damage to the ankle that betrayed me. I chipped my pinky toe on plastic pool steps while I was swimming. Being a young kid obsessed with ninjas, I, at 4 years old, repeatedly jumped from our ottoman to kick the back of our couch in mid-air. I did it so many times that I broke my ankle. In which movie did the villain actually have a pretty legit point? School of Rock. Principal Mullins definitely had a right to be concerned. No Vacancy had a right to kick him out of the band, and Ned and his girlfriend had a right to be teed off at their roommate for not paying rent. Turns out being funny and entertaining doesn't make Jack Black's character a good person after doing many very crappy and illegal things. Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. The play's entire message could be summed up as, Shylock's not wrong, he's just a butthole. Every sports movie where they show rivals as the villain. Oh, but you don't understand. They're moderately better off than the underdogs, enough to afford combs and haircuts, matching uniforms, and not be dysfunctional until they realize the family they need is the team right there. Pure, unfiltered evil. I mean, Khan was right. Kirk could have at least sent a fruit basket along over the years. Do you think he reported it to Starfleet? Oh, by the way, I found a really powerful evil genius, and instead of beelining it to Earth where he can face trial for his crimes, I decided to drop him on planet Australia to see if hard work will mold him into a better person. Just figured I'd say something. Check up on him, or don't, I don't care. Oh, easy. Attack of the Clones. The villain, Count Dooku, straight up told Obi-Wan that the Galactic Republic was under control of a Sith Master. Which, this bothered me. Okay, so you think Count Dooku was lying? Couldn't one Jedi double-check the vetting on the Chancellor just to make sure? Wouldn't that have been prudent? Oh hey, just in case guys, let's look into this. Barbossa. He just wanted to be uncursed. Granted, he was a real butthole about it. Well, he'd been dealing with Jack Sparrow for decades. Nobody actually likes Jack Sparrow except the audience. His former crew mutinied, he constantly betrays everyone around him, he tries to abandon ship by himself when the Kraken comes, he makes out with another man's fiancée, and he drinks all the frickin' rum. He's only tolerated because he's clever, has a magic compass, and is extremely lucky. Baby's dad in Dirty Dancing. He just wanted to keep a sketchy dance instructor from doing the deed with his underage daughter. Oh boy, it's been a while since I've seen that film, but I mostly saw movies with Patrick Swayze when he kind of played a skeevy older guy in the early 2000s, so it seems a lot more plausible to me now. Blade Runner. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. Time to die. The point was that they just wanted to live. The shark in Jaws. The ocean is his home. Peter Benchley reportedly felt guilty over the anti-shark sentiments that his book and the film caused. Now, he wasn't really a villain, but he was the antagonist. Goofy in A Goofy Movie had understandably good reasons to be scared for his son from his perspective. The real villain was a lack of communication. "Hey Dad, before we go on this road trip, can I go to this end of school year party first? There's this girl I really like who's going to be there and wanted me to be there too." Was all it would have taken for Goofy to delay the road trip a bit and avoid all the shenanigans. Or if that was out of the question, later on he could have said, "Hey Dad, can we add a stop onto the road trip and go to a concert?" instead of having to get all underhanded and weird about it. The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, she was a witch, but come on. They were her dead sister's shoes. She should have had them, not some stranger who just showed up and wants them. Oh, and by the way, this stranger that just showed up was the one that killed her sister. Sad, really. Dorothy may have gotten credit for the kill, but it wasn't like she was steering the house. Besides, Glenda magics the shoes onto Dorothy, who can't get them off. Have you watched Wicked? It's definitely worth it. It tells the story of the witch as the protagonist. Generally, I think Dr. Doofenshmirtz had a point in the first movie. Evil Dr. D's reason for being evil being the loss of a toy train is kind of meh. I think the mark of a good villain is one that's identified a problem correctly but has become completely attached to a bad solution for it. Conversely, The Verge did a great article a while back about how pretty much every superhero narrative is about the heroes not really working to make the world a better place, but merely protecting the status quo instead. On the other hand, godlike superhumans imposing their vision of a better world on us, whether we want it or not, gets pretty fricking dystopian pretty quick. Flint Marko, aka Sandman from Spider-Man 3. He's a desperate father with a daughter on her deathbed, just trying to amass the necessary funding to bring her back to health. They really screwed that one up. He could have been a great sympathetic villain if the studio hadn't forced them into adding venom. Damned story was pulled in all directions. Marko's character never got any proper development. Magneto from the X-Men series, particularly the reboot, especially in Days of Future Past. And when you view it from his point of view, he survived one of the darkest times of modern history. He saw what people are willing to do when they hate and fear a group enough. And then, in Days of Future Past, he was right. Can you blame him? I hate the X-Men movies because they butchered the timeline, but I love how Magneto was handled. Emperor's New Groove. Kronk's Shoulder Devil. No, he's got a point. There's this podcast run by two stand-up comedians called The Villain Was Right that has quite a long list of episodes on this premise, ranging from Death from Final Destination to Arnold from the Magic School Bus. Definitely recommend. Arnold was such a jerk. Remember when he took his helmet off on Pluto to prove a point and promptly frickin' died? I remember that traumatizing crap. Well, that wasn't to prove a point, that was to get his somehow bigger butthole cousin to leave behind all of the souvenirs she'd been collecting from other planets, making the bus too heavy to fly. And it did work. Squidward from SpongeBob. He's not really the villain, technically, but many children hate him. As you grow up, you truly realize that he's not wrong at all. He just doesn't want to be bothered at all, and he lives with two really annoying, although lovable, most of the time, neighbors that always want to hang out. And I respect that. Some of you are saying he's a butthole for no reason and messes with SpongeBob and Patrick. However, if you were to be tormented at work and at home by the same people every single day, I'm sure you guys would be jerks too. I don't blame him, honestly. Mr. Krabs is the real villain of SpongeBob. The man has committed so many worker violations it's not even funny. X-Men. Any of them. Anytime Magneto does anything ever. But he's also one of the more nuanced villains in popular culture of all time. I also appreciate how Magneto and Xavier could have killed each other at any time, but they respect each other's right to exist, even if they want drastically different things. It's about the success of an idea rather than mindless killing, and that's actually just as relevant, if not more relevant now than it ever has been. General Hummel, or Ed Harris in The Rock. All he wanted was for soldiers' sacrifices to be recognized by their government. He just chose the worst possible way to pursue that goal. The Incredibles. The line, "If everyone's special, then no one is," blew my mind when I was younger. The thing is though, Syndrome only plans on sharing his technology after he's too old to be a hero anymore, and he explicitly states this. He really doesn't care about equality between normal people and supers. While he's still young, he wants to be the only super to reap all the glory, and only once he's too old to continue will he share his tech. The Bee Movie. Why was everyone okay with a woman and a bee being in a relationship? Honestly, when I watched The Bee Movie as a kid, I thought it was about the bee and the woman becoming friends, but her husband was cruel to animals, which is why she broke up with him, and then they saved the bees as friends? It wasn't until recently when I realized they were meant to be in a relationship, and I find that really creepy. I've never seen this film. It looked like absolute garbage even when I was a teen. But the fact that it's come up in multiple videos by now for different insane reasons really testifies to there being something just so insane about it that maybe I have to watch it for craps and giggles. Megamind. Privilege dictates social status. The machines in the Matrix. The humans in that story were stupid, cruel, and destroyed the Earth. In doing so, they nearly killed off the machines and all life on the planet. The machines had mercy on the humans and created the Matrix for them. Hell, the first version they made was a complete paradise. Tell me, if you were enslaving a race just to use them for power, would you give a crap about what condition they were in mentally? No, but the machines did. You see outright compassion from various machines, like the AIs in the Matrix, as in the Oracle and the family at the bus station. There's a section of the machines that wants to preserve humanity. They see their self-destructive tendencies and find a way to contain that. The Matrix was not needed as a power source. The machines could have used nuclear or thermal energy to power themselves. Heck, they could have left Earth altogether. But they stayed to take care of humanity. It's almost kind of sweet in this way, like a child taking care of a parent when they're older, even though they were old and cranky and might be difficult to deal with. Some of the villains from Marvel, most of the heroes just ruined their lives. Vulture from Spider-Man 1 Homecoming got completely jerked over. And Thor 1? In Loki's eyes, he's trying to save Asgard from his idiot brother. Not my words, that's paraphrased from the writer. In a sense, that makes Odin the villain, considering that guy imprisoned his own daughter after having a change of heart and then rewriting his own history. Yeah, Odin's definitely not Father of the Year. The dad in the Lego Movie. Kids just break Legos and turn your house into a Lego mine. Damn right. I'm in my 40s and my mom got me the new-ish Lego bouquet for my birthday, and the kids are already eyeing it to make something new. That thing is getting craggled. Sweeney Todd. Okay, so no excuse to go murder half of London, but when your chief enemy is a corrupt judge and the corrupt law enforcer who abets him in his career of unspeakable act offenses and cruelty, violence does seem a semi-reasonable response. Aliens. They were minding their business until their homeworld became prime for intergalactic corporate mining and exploitation. Well, actually, it's not their home planet. Their creators crashed there. It's basically a truck full of anthrax, if the anthrax was a 6-foot monster with acid for blood. I don't know if you can really call him the villain, but Andrew in Chronicle was right in a twisted sort of way. Nobody helps him. Everyone does whatever they want with no consideration for how it affects everyone else simply because they can. And suddenly, when he finds himself with the power to take what he wants and do what he wants, he does just that. Now that you mention it, something that sticks out to me was that he was simply trying to improve his life at first. He could have made a hit list of bullies and jocks to start getting revenge on, but he was initially content to have friends and explore their abilities together. Then he took a chance and put himself out there for the talent show, which he probably would have never had the confidence to do otherwise. If that party had gone well for him instead of humiliating him, I honestly wonder if or how he might have changed his life for the better. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The Grinch. Whole gosh darn town of Whoville is pushing Christmas down everyone's throats. Just how materialistic and shallow the Whos were about it? Cindy knew there was more to Christmas than gifts, and when the same revelation occurred for the Grinch, he stopped hating it. Loki in the first Avengers had a point about people only wanting the illusion of freedom. I read something recently that really threw me for a loop. People don't want democracy. They want a dictator they agree with. It's hard to find something wrong with that statement, and that disturbs me. I mean, it's basically obvious now. I watched Handmaid's Tale, and something said on that show made a good observation. Republicans aren't for freedom of, they want freedom from. Freedom from choice, from speech that goes against them, freedom from living with neighbors of other races and religions, freedom from choice of what to do with their body, freedom from choice of church to go to, and freedom from agnostics and atheists calling out hypocrisy and ignorance, freedom from truth and from reality. Sonic, the line of Dr. Robotnik, well, that was unexpected, but I was expecting not to expect something, so it doesn't count. A really underrated film called Battle for Terra. The human race was dying and basically was going to colonize the nearest planet their refugee ships drifted towards, but they would be exterminating the native inhabitants due to terraforming. The villain was a heartless killer, but he made a very good point for doing what he did. Future generations may call me a monster, but because of me, there will be future generations. I didn't like him, but I couldn't deny that he cared about humanity. This is where Zod had a point in Man of Steel, except there was literally no reason they couldn't just terraform Mars or Venus instead. Carrie, they all deserved it. A lot of comments saying that Carrie wasn't the villain, and personally, I agree. Her revenge was entirely justified, but most sources do view her as the villain for committing mass murder and burning down the entire school in the process. I've always sympathized more with Magneto and the Brotherhood than with the X-Men. He definitely went too far with the whole kill all non-humans thing, but his primary motivation throughout most of the series was to protect his people from the things he'd witnessed during his childhood in concentration camps. He's right when he says they'll never fully be accepted in society, only tolerated, and humans are cruel to those that are seen as different. Ultron, my man spent 5 minutes on the internet and decided to erase mankind. Can't say that I blame him. Yep, he took 1 millisecond to look at Reddit's dank memes and thought, yep, this planet ain't worth it. Anyone who digests the entire 500 or so hours of my voice acting on the internet at once is probably going to want to burn the whole place down just to stop it ever happening again. Val Kilmer as Iceman in Top Gun. He was 100% accurate. Maverick was dangerous. So dangerous that he got his co-pilot killed. Dr. Evil. Face it, freedom failed. Also, when he's unfrozen and threatens to melt the polar ice caps and flood the entire world, and someone has to tell him, we're actually already doing that. And he looks at the camera and says, are you people crazy? Collateral. Tom Cruise telling Jamie Foxx to man up and stop limiting himself. Also a great action movie. The takedown at the dance club is the best. Blade Runner. The speech at the end is phenomenal. I don't even think the replicants are the enemy. At the end, the replicant isn't even an antagonist since he saves Deckard from death. Brilliantly written movie, and frankly my favorite science fiction movie ever. Jaws. He was just trying to survive. The villain in Jaws wasn't the shark, it was the mayor. Agent Smith in The Matrix. It's the smell. I mean, if I recall correctly, we, the humans, started the war. We blacked out the sun, and we started it. And when the machines took over, they tried to give us a paradise. I'd say it's pretty easy to argue that Agent Smith and the machines aren't really that bad. Killmonger. I can't agree with his methods, but he was right in that Wakanda's isolationism had to end. And it was at least partly through his actions that T'Challa found an option between his father's isolationism and Killmonger's revolution. Honestly, most villains had a good point. A well-written one should. They should have a point of view that's valid, even if the ends don't justify the means. I think a really well-written villain, you can even justify their actions as well. Lost. The black smoke monster just wanted to get off the island like everyone else. I caught part of what I think was the Kingsman, or possibly the Kingsman 2, at a hotel the other night. This lady, set up as the villain, was like, I've laced all the illegal substances with a deadly virus, or bacteria, I forget which, that I have the antidote to, and I will happily provide it free of charge if you meet my demands, which are to make all currently illegal substances legal so they can be regulated and produced through supply lines, which will end substance wars and create new and legitimate business opportunities. I was like, so she's done some terrible things, and I don't agree with the way she's going about this, but why is this a villainous bad thing? I agree with her? And then the President of the United States was like, we'll pretend to agree with her to buy time, but do nothing and let all those useless substance addicts die. And I was like, wait, who are the bad guys in this? Joker in The Dark Knight. When the chips are down, these civilized people will eat each other. He was way ahead of the curve before we even knew it. Jim Lahey. The boys really did mess up his life with no gratitude ever shown towards him. He only ever wanted to provide a peaceful living condition for everyone in the park. Rest in peace, John Dunsworth. Samuel L. Jackson in the first Kingsman movie. Yeah, I'd disagree. Like 70% of climate change is corporate waste. The whole thing about just saving the elites was messed up. Cabin in the Woods. It was all to save the world. Any horror movie when the killer kills the teens that snuck onto his property or into his house. The older I get, the more I relate to his frustrations. Ozymandias. Well, I'm not so sure. I think the Tales of the Black Freighter side story was a clue that Ozymandias was wrong. There was never going to be a nuclear war, just like there wasn't one in the real world, and things were worse here. There was no Dr. Manhattan to snap his fingers and fix everything. Just like the sailor in the side story, Ozymandias became a murderer to prevent something that wasn't going to happen in the first place. Michael Douglas in Falling Down had a lot of points. Not all of them were good, but some of them were. The EPA guy from Ghostbusters. 100% correct, except for turning off a system he didn't understand. I want you to imagine those dang D-bags from Ghost Adventures had particle accelerators strapped to them and a giant bomb waiting to go off in their basement. Just really sit with that for a minute. The aliens from Independence Day. This planet is pretty sweet. I'd want to live here if I didn't already. But they're idiots. There's no resources here on Earth that aren't also out in the asteroid belt or Oort cloud in far vaster quantities and way easier to harvest without having to drag it out of a gravity well. That's why all of those, they want our resources, alien invasion things fall apart under basic scrutiny. Look at V. In the very first trailer for the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie, Robotnik wants to murder a terrifying beast with weird eyes. Oh boy, it's been a while since I thought about the original Sonic trailer. And yeah, fair enough, kill it with fire. I still don't know if that was a really good save or a clever and conniving marketing ploy to get more attention. Whatever it was, it worked. Well done, Sonic. The Lost World, Jurassic Park. The plot of the movie is that the animals bred by InGen, aka cloned from dead mosquito blood, are being transported to San Diego to serve as a zoo exhibit. Their well-organized expedition is led by an expert hunter and survivalist and his team. The heroes of the movie are hippie do-gooders who think the animals InGen created should live outside of captivity, and in order to stop the big bad corporation, they sabotage their weapons, cages, and other equipment, even triggering a mass dinosaur escape in their camp. This expedition is led by an incompetent moron masquerading as a wildlife expert, whose first shown action on screen is touching a baby stegosaurus, terrifying it with her camera and triggering a stampede. Her lack of experience leads to the death of the only man on her crew who knew what he was doing, and the near death of her entire party, which was prevented only by the intervention of the people they've been sabotaging. So in short, legal owners and creators of animals want to put some of them in a zoo. Know-nothing hippies try to stop them with no legal recourse, endangering everyone's lives in the process, and the corporate owners in the end save all of their butts. Moana. You know, if someone stole my heart, I'd want to try to get it back through any means necessary, even if it turns me into a lava monster and create a massive corruption that will inevitably send the entire world into the bloodthirsty jaws of an inescapable death. John Milton from Devil's Advocate is my favorite movie villain who has a point. Pitch Perfect 1, 2, and 3. Come on now, the Treblemakers had way better arrangements. Heck, Homeboy was literally called up to work with John Mayer. The Smoker had a better voice than all of them. Part 2, the German group, was far superior. Their mums were subpar at best. I mean, they hadn't sung for like 2 to 3 decades. In 3, all of the other bands are better. Adrian Toomes, played by Michael Keaton from Spider-Man Homecoming. The new Spider-Man movies have been doing a great job with the villains. Caddyshack. Ted Knight just wants to play golf with his rich friends, and Rodney Dangerfield comes in with his plans to destroy the golf course. Poison Ivy. She's trying to protect nature. Mr. Freeze is trying to save his wife. The Devil Wears Prada. The boyfriend is the real villain. The writer of the movie was tired of the old nagging wife holds back her ambitious husband archetype. She believed that in many of those past movies, the wife was absolutely correct to be wary of how their husbands were changing to become bullheaded and neglectful men who do nothing but think of their ambitions. She decided to show how it looks from the other side, and what ended up happening was women reacted to the boyfriend the way men reacted to the old wives. When did you learn the perfect family had a deep, dark secret. My next-door neighbor, husband, wife, and their 2 young girls, and my neighbors down the road, husband, wife, and 3 young girls, were the best of friends and did everything together. They went on vacations together, they went out to dinner together, they even bought a timeshare together. My family had to move to a different state for 2 years, and this was during the housing crash of 2008. So our house just never sold, and we just moved right back in. Well, when we were cleaning our house to move back in, we found a Kama Sutra-style book in a bathroom drawer and a mysterious bleach stain on some carpet. We'd told all the neighbors where the extra key was in case they wanted to store stuff temporarily or take cover during a hurricane. We live in Florida. Since there wasn't anything of ours there to steal, we just assumed some teenager couldn't find anything better to crank it to and had tried to clean up his mess. After a few months of being moved back in, our next-door neighbors moved out in the middle of the night. They left in such a hurry that they left their cat. We came to learn that the husband of our next-door neighbors and the wife of the other neighbors were having an affair and using our house as a rendezvous, and used baby monitors to keep an eye on their kids. When we moved back in, they started taking business trips and they eventually got caught. The wife of the next-door neighbors was willing to work things out, but didn't want to be in the same neighborhood as that hussy. That was convenient as the husband down the street was basically a hillbilly Jason Momoa and was threatening to kill them. In the end, we got a cat, which was neat. He died a few years ago, but he was a great cat. When I was a kid, I knew a set of twins who were friends with my older sister. The twins, both female, were straight-A students and always dressed modestly. Neither girl was allowed to date, and their parents owned a huge house with multiple cars, and the girls never seemed to want for anything. Anyway, a few years later, the parents were busted because apparently they owned another house a few streets away. Less lavish, and they were running a brothel out of it, with girls the same age as their daughters, who were around 18 at this time and both in university. I just found it very ironic that they were so protective over their own daughters, but were hiring out other people's daughters. My grandpa knew and grew up with Joseph Mengele. My grandma still denies the experiments that happened in that most famous camp of the atrocities against the Jewish people prior and during World War II. She doesn't deny the killing, but rather Mengele's role in the camp. Just to note, my grandpa said he didn't like Mengele, even as kids. He was self-centered and ruthless. Freaking wild that there are family friends of people who worked in those camps who are at terms with what happened there, even if they deny that family's involvement. Sadly, that's still an improvement from some of the people I see on Twitter who still deny that dark period in history with everything they can muster. The mum remarried when her kids were quite young to a new, perfect stepdad. Roll on 10 years and the 15-year-old daughter notices something in the bathroom while she's showering. Webcam, via the stepdad. That's not the darkest part, though. The darkest part, in my humble opinion, is that her mum forgave him for filming her children there and told the daughter she'd always put her husband first and arranged for her daughter to go live with their nan. My grandpa, on my mum's side, had another family on the side. When he died, my grandma's name was put on his gravestone, and the other family chiseled it out. Also, my oldest aunt on my mum's side isn't blood-related. Didn't learn that until I was 23. Of course, our side of the family says we were the main family. But that's because he was married to my grandma first. Not sure how the other family found out. My grandma found out after rumors started spreading and she confronted him. The other family was from another town. This was in the 60s and grandma was an immigrant housewife, so she didn't have too many options but to stay with him. So it's not spoken of too much. Grandpa died when my grandma was pregnant with my mum. They kept their handicapped son locked up. Most people didn't even know he existed. They made his room like a padded cell and just left him in bed all the time, with a nurse coming to bathe, feed, and rotate him. His parents didn't even talk to him or look at him often. My grandfather lives in Tennessee by himself, kind of out in the mountains. Well, there's a family cemetery in his backyard up this 50-yard long hill that's covered in thick trees. There's a guy in our family buried up there with his 9 dead children and 4 dead wives, who all died at pretty young ages. All the women he married died around 3 to 5 years after they got married. This was back in the mid to late 1800s, and I guess the guy was known to be real shady. Still unknown if he played a part in all those deaths or if he was just a super unlucky man. I worked at an Amazon store. The owner of the place hired this kid whose parents went to his church. The day this kid was supposed to start, the whole family shows up. Mum, dad, and son. They all just start working. The owner was too spineless to let them go, so they all got hired. And they were pretty much bottom-of-the-barrel workers and just kind of kept to themselves aside from pleasantries. We were sort of a rowdy bunch and they just didn't fit in, and also the three of them did the work of one person. My co-worker started referring to them as the Dahmer family because the father resembled Jeffrey Dahmer, and they were a little bit too idyllic and Christian. And then things started to get weird. The son regularly called out, citing stomach issues and saying certain tasks made his legs tired and things like that. Mr. Dahmer started having these intense fits of rage where he'd go off on us for minor things. Miss Dahmer started to become strangely attached to me and regularly bought me strange gifts like holistic headache creams, a neti pot, organic tea, stuff like that. Years later, I found out the son had acquired immune deficiency syndrome. The mother and the son were a little too close for that age. The father eventually got caught doing some strange things and they got a divorce. Miss Dahmer, on my last week working there, started asking me about demons and things. On my last day, she gave me this manila envelope that had this 30-page manifesto she'd written as a letter to me about how she was infested with demons and all kinds of crazy Song of Solomon type things. She thought I was infested with demons too. But hey, I still have that neti pot. I met my friend's grandparents, and they're your typical, kind, white doily-toting American grandparents. They were literally the cutest people in the world, and they're extremely friendly. Turns out, for a time in the 60s and 70s, they were in a cult full of people who mainly just did the deed all the time. It's an open secret that my friend's uncle is actually the child of the grandmother and the cult leader. There are the ones about my family that I've told before. We aren't perfect, but things like attempted axe-murdering grandfather are pretty crazy secrets. But as a kid, I hung out with a guy who was part of a perfect family, it seemed. His mum was an Olympic rower, and his dad was some super cool business exec. We were good friends from like 12 to 14 or so, and then we went to different schools. I found out his mum died of cancer like a year later, which was very sad. Then the next year, it came to light the dad was guilty of a number of crimes too terrible to put on YouTube. He went to jail for life. It was one of those floor falling out of the world kind of things. Poor guy. I have a very small family of about 7 people. Growing up, everyone would get together for events, and everything seemed pretty normal, and everyone seemed to get along. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I noticed that everyone in my family actually hates the crap out of each other, and it was just some huge contest to see who had become the better person over the years. My mother and my grandfather are the only ones who talk to each other, and it's probably only because they live together. My grandmother and grandfather are separated, and my grandmother only calls him every few months to see if he's dead or not. My parents were in a cult for years that worshipped chaos magic. Did they say things like, "Death to the false emperor," or "I can feel the warp overtaking me. It's a good pain"? This went 0 to 40k real quick. So, as I often have to do for these videos, I've had to go on a bit of a Google to find out what the chaos magic cult is, and it's wild that anyone takes it seriously. And yes, when that Warhammer reference popped up, you had my attention. I hope there were 1 or 2 of you watching who got a chuckle as well. Not a deep dark secret, but one that isn't openly spoken about among family. My aunt's husband is, to put it lightly, a very violent man. My aunt has had an interesting dating life. She had an out-of-wedlock daughter with some guy, and about 15 years later she had another daughter with some guy who also walked out on them. A few years ago, her daughter was friends with some girl at school. My aunt met the girl's dad and they really hit it off. This was kind of a watered-down Parent Trap or Love Actually kind of thing, really sweet at first. The guy really seemed like the perfect guy for her. Funny, intelligent, and really ripped. My mum joked that my aunt was the best-looking of her family, 7 sisters in all, so they'd produce good-looking kids. Oh, and the guy was rich. He owned a franchise of a hotel chain and a company that supplied fire safety gear or something. They had a baby together, so in total my aunt has 4 kids, each with a different biological father. Anyway, it wasn't long before my aunt would come crying to her sisters after she and her husband had a shouting match. Eventually, it got so bad that things got physical. And for the months that followed, continuing up to the present day, they've been in the following cycle. Get into an argument, things get physical, she leaves, staying with sisters for a while, and then she goes back to him. They make up with an expensive vacation, all on credit, apparently in spite of initially rich husband, then now in the red, and then they argue again. It's happened so many times that even her sisters are getting numb to it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My family seemed pretty perfect until my folks got divorced when I was 13. They both assured me that it wasn't anyone's fault. As it turns out, while I wasn't the reason, I was the catalyst. My dad started to notice as I aged that I shared no physical features with him. He confronted my mum about it and she revealed the truth. I was the product of a drunken one-night stand. My mum and dad had dated briefly and then broken up. Shortly after the breakup, Mum went to a party and hooked up with some guy. When she discovered that she was pregnant, she contacted my dad and told him that I was his son. They got married shortly after I was born. Dad agreed that no one else needed to be told, but the fact that the whole marriage had been built on a lie brought up a lot of bad crap to the surface, and they decided to call it quits. My perfect family was shattered, but what's worse, a lot of terrible things have come to the surface in the years since that have poisoned all but a few of my memories of growing up. My dad vanished from me and my sister's lives for about a year after the divorce. When he came back to start his visitation with us, he was in a relationship with another woman and she was already pregnant. From age 14 through 21, we still had a father-son relationship, albeit a tumultuous one. I blamed both him and Mum for the divorce at first, but I eventually came around and by the time I joined the Air Force, we were thick as thieves. And then I got married. Dad did not approve of my wife and we started arguing bitterly. Eventually, I cut a little too deep and he contacted my mum and demanded that either she tell me the truth of my paternity or he would. I was 21 when I found out and it staggered me. Not surprisingly, it brought me and Dad closer together and turned to me against my mum for a while. Eventually, Dad divorced his second wife and things faltered between us. He's a bitter alcoholic who can't come to any of mine or my siblings' major life events because he has warrants for unpaid child support. More for my two sisters, both of whom are very much his. I haven't spoken to him in 2 years because it's just easier not having to deal with his drama all the time. I still consider him my dad. Me and my mum eventually had it out and things healed nicely between us. The only thing that hasn't been resolved is the true nature of my paternity. She insists she doesn't know who my donor was, but several people in my family have told me that she does. I haven't pressed the issue yet. I found out more about my family after my great-grandfather passed away than I ever knew. My mum's side is from a small coal mining town in West Virginia. After my great-grandfather passed away, I found out that my great-grandmother was actually my great-great-aunt. My great-grandmother's sister. I don't know how the once-removed thing works. Turns out my real great-grandmother was a working girl with many kids by many different men. Being unfit to be the mother of my grandfather, my great-granddad shacked up with her sister, Rosie. Rosie was a raging alcoholic and it wasn't out of character for her to drink herself into oblivion, and when an ambulance would come to pump her stomach, she'd shoot at them with a revolver to get them to leave. Unfortunately, she'd also been cheating on my great-grandfather, John. John was respected by everyone in the community, and I've never heard an ill word spoken about him. He went to the man that was cheating with Rosie. Both men worked in the coal mine, and he said, "I'm a good Christian man, and I forgive you, but if I see you at my house, you're a dead man." 2 weeks later, he shot him in the head with a revolver when he found him at his house. John went to jail for 2 years because in West Virginia at the time, it was justifiable homicide. While in jail, the oldest son, my grandfather, was only 14, but there was no money coming into the family, so he lied about his age so he could drive to the coal mine. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade and started to work as a blaster, his first day in the mine. My grandmother was born in Jersey, and her mother died when she was 7. Left with an inept alcoholic father, she was put in horrible foster homes. She was sometimes kept in a dark closet under the stairs for misbehaving, Harry Potter style, among other punishments. Eventually, at age 15, she ran away with a friend and ended up in a small West Virginia town. She got a job serving tables where she met my 14-year-old grandfather drinking beer, after lying about his age, and they've been together ever since. They're now both 78 and 79 in a $1 million home near DC with just as many stories as you could imagine. It's pretty wild how small decisions echo for generations. Great showcase that where you come from doesn't necessarily determine what or who you are. It's a damn sight more difficult to get out of that situation though, don't get me wrong. Good on them. Hopefully all that hardship and perspective helped them bring up their kids in an environment of love and support, nothing like the one your grandma went through. Given that I was pretty young at the time, I probably missed some warning signs. A good friend of mine had a pretty horrible home life at the hands of his mother, and I had no idea. He was the class clown and always seemed happy. We'd hang out at each other's houses after school and play on the weekends. I never had a weird experience with his mother. Years later, he unalived her in her sleep. Family whose parents were popular and well-liked in the area back when they were in high school. Their daughters were all popular and well-liked as well in high school, They were all the type of people that had no strong opinions and didn't care to argue, just kinda positive people. People were automatically drawn to them, and for that, everyone in town liked them. They have some ownership in a local dealership too, and their girls are on a lot of the commercials. One day, one of their daughters, same grade as me back in high school, let it slip to me that she'd found a hidden camera in the pool changing room at their pool house. She said it in kind of a, "Oh yeah, shrug, found a camera, my dad is so silly" kind of way. It kind of seems like she was assuming he put it there to catch them drinking, but she realized that it was probably more than that. But she just figures, boys will be boys kind of thing. The dad looked like the creepiest motherfricker ever, and he has been likely videotaping not only them, but all of their friends, which is like nearly all the popular high school women in my town. Ugh. I have yet to prove that the family next door is in witness protection or a spy family, but I'm on to you, John. I moved to a state 10 years ago, and right away I was able to work from home. Because of that, I thought it would be fun to buy a Porsche convertible as my daily driver because every drive was for fun, no commuting or any of that nonsense. Everyone in my neighborhood thought I was under witness protection. I showed them my work setup with all the monitors and fast internet, but they thought it was for gaming because of the fancy rig I used to run it all. To this day, even though I now work a normal job, they're convinced that I'm in some way under witness protection. On my mother's side, I have an aunt who decided to steal money from a charity which was set up to rebuild a guy's house that had recently burnt down. It was a small town, so all they had was a bin for dollar bills at the local bar, and she just took all of it and the next day had some expensive new shoes. And on my dad's side, my grandfather was some weasel-faced con man who cheated a church, celebrities, and politicians so he could live without working. But one day, he and one of the largest sport memorabilia collections on Earth disappeared. He apparently was killed in a mob hit. This isn't my family, but I absolutely have to share this. The only reason I am is it's been about 2 years since they discovered, and they're more comfortable joking about it now. I never asked about the aftermath. I know 2 girls who were sisters, who had their family issues or whatever, but they were happy with each other for the most part. Their dad always went on business trips, and he wasn't home a lot. It did seem kind of suspicious because he was a chef, I think, or he made recipes for a kitchen. Something weird where it didn't really warrant business trips. But I don't think they really thought anything of it. It turns out the sister's family is actually his second family, and the other family had 2 brothers who were both older than the sisters. He put 3/4 of the kids through college, and the 4th was currently in school. They found out because the other mother of the family was digging on Facebook one day and found a picture of their dad and the girl's mum. She sent the sister's mum a death threat, and they pieced it together from there. It wasn't even in my family, but I was absolutely floored by it. The perfect rich family in my neighborhood are deep in debt. Nobody must know. I have a cousin out there that my whole family has never met. My grandparents were the nicest people, but apparently my aunt got pregnant as a teen, and they sent her away to have the baby and give it up for adoption. I believe this would have been sometime in the 60s or even late 50s given her age. One of my parents told me this a while ago, and I've never heard anyone in my whole family ever mention anything about it other than that one time. I lived in Georgia for about a year while my dad was stationed in Fort Benning, started freshman year of high school, and met a really cool girl that I maintained a pretty good friendship with. She was an only child, and her parents were some of the most devout Catholics I'd ever met. Even my dad, who was raised Catholic and maintained his faith through his adulthood, didn't really compare. Pretty normal family setting for them, but I moved away after a year because Dad retired from the army. Closer towards when I left, I went over to visit and walked to the front door to see her mum getting spit roasted in the middle of their living room. Her husband wasn't even home. Their secret was that they actually were perfect. Honestly, I've learned a lot of deep, dark secrets about a lot of families. What freaked me out the most was learning that an actual Leave It to Beaver kind of family could exist. It took me years to learn how to deal with it. No, I honestly can't believe that exists. Try pulling out all the books on the bookcases. There's a dungeon or a slaughterhouse for humans somewhere in their house, if they have any amount of money. I will vouch my monthly income on it. Not necessarily dark, but before going to college, I was told that I had an uncle that I'd never met. My grandfather cheated on my grandma with his secretary and ended up getting her pregnant. She caught him when going through his bank statements and noticed that he was paying child support to a woman that she had never heard of. Originally, my parents weren't supposed to tell us until my grandma passed away. She was too embarrassed and hurt by my grandfather's infidelity for us to know that we had an uncle. When my mum told me about him, I was able to determine his age and his middle name. It turned out he was only 2 years older than me and still lived in the same county as where he was born. I spent 6 months scouring Facebook and sending strangers messages about unknown family members. Eventually, I was able to find him. When I did find him, it turned out he was struggling with substance and alcohol addiction. I told him I wouldn't bring him home to meet his brothers, nieces, and nephews until he was clean and sober for 1 year, and that if he tried to reach out before that, I'd make sure he had no contact with our family moving forward. It was a hard thing to tell someone at 19 years old, but he took it seriously and got clean. A year later, I brought him home to meet his brother, my dad, for the first time. It was weird. My uncle had a kid with some lady and his family doesn't know, but it's almost common knowledge on his side of the family. She was sleeping with her husband's brother. At 60, she divorced him and married the brother. The most shocking part is that all three eventually ended up back on friendly terms and were invited to the next 3 weddings of the husband, though the wife and brother did not live to see the 4th. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.